Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. American Comics. Starting Social Security Black Silk Wanda. Chapter 1. Early morning in New York. The light from the NASDAQ screen shines through the brown glass into the British-style cafe. According to our news, a vicious incident occurred in Germany yesterday, and the Avengers immediately stopped the crime. But it is regrettable that Wanda Maximoff, codenamed Scarlet Witch, caused nearly 60 casualties due to her mistake. The large screen TV hanging on the wall was broadcasting a piece of news. It's so abominable, these superheroes are just using their reputation to cause trouble everywhere. The well-dressed bearded boss put the coffee on the young man's table, stared at the TV with disgust on his face and cursed in a low voice. Uncle Crew, do you really believe the media's one-sided story? The young man sitting on the leather sofa picked up the silver spoon and stirred the Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee without even turning his head, and responded nonchalantly. As he stirred the silver spoon, the rich aroma of coffee flowed into his nose, and the corners of his mouth could not help but slightly rise. Howard, I saw it happen to me. I saw that big green monster smash my house with the car I bought on loan. Fake, that was the house I saved for more than 10 years to buy. When Crew mentioned this, his already broad chest rose and fell violently. On that day, he witnessed unprecedented despair, and even now he is still shaking with anger. Uncle Crew, this is the third time you have said. And didn't I give you a better house and car as compensation later? Hodder picked up a small piece of sugar and put it into the coffee, shaking his head helplessly. Whenever there was news about superheroes on TV, Uncle Crew would curse uncontrollably. That's different. Even so, you can't do whatever you want. Uncle Crew put his hands on his waist, and the breath he exhaled made his gray beard tremble. Facing Uncle Crew's answer, Hood put down the coffee and shook his head. No hurry, sometimes you shouldn't make conclusions too early, let the bullets fly for a while. He knew better than anyone that the Avengers were not to blame for what happened. It was just that the media intended to push the Avengers to the forefront through overwhelming public pressure. The purpose of doing so was nothing more than to force Tony Stark and others to agree to the government's next superhero plan. Let the Avengers fully agree to the government's trusteeship. In this practice, Wanda was the most critical victim. The reason why he knew all this was because he was a time traveler. Hood took the coffee in his hand and took a sip of the rich coffee, his eyes filled with memories. More than a year ago, he traveled to this world. And he also got the golden finger that a time traveler must have. Life surprise system, enjoy life, enjoy life. As the name suggests, as long as he enjoys a high quality and comfortable life, he may trigger rewards. For example, random rewards such as $1 million, unlimited lubricant, a hard and indestructible stick. Ding, you tasted premium Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. Reward, $100,000. My dear Mr. Hood, bullets don't fly for long. Uncle Crew's elegant English accent brought Hood back to reality. It's hard to say, time will prove what I said. Hodder put down the coffee cup and casually placed a stack of US dollars on the table. Just as he was about to push the door open and leave, he seemed to remember something and turned back and said, Uncle Hodder, your coffee today is still very delicious. See you tomorrow. After that, the oak door of the coffee shop slowly closed, and the copper bell on it made a crisp ring. This kid. Crew looked up at the figure through the brown glass of the store door and smiled, then reluctantly stuffed the bill into his cash register. This man with a unique charm in his every move was the biggest customer in his store. He would walk into his coffee shop on time at 4 o'clock every afternoon, and would leave calmly after taking a few sips of coffee. And before leaving every time, he would not forget to leave a $1,000 tip. The afterglow of the setting sun casts a shadow on the green pine trees. Under the light, the pine needles look like golden painted needles. The black Cayenne is driving on the road to the suburbs. Occasionally, you have to live in a different place. Hodder controlled the steering wheel with his right hand and placed his left hand outside the window to feel the breeze. The scenery not far away made him feel a little happier. His destination this time was a manor in the suburbs. It was a manor obtained by the system reward. Although it was remote, the scenery was particularly beautiful. As the distance from the city got farther and farther, the houses around became fewer and fewer. Even driving for more than a kilometer might not see a house. The long road was like a ruler that went straight into the woods. In the quiet environment, the chirping of birds on the roadside could be heard from time to time. It's Tri Way. It's King of New York looks in for the Queen. Ah, you got the right one. Quote, quote. A lively song came from the Bose speakers. Hodder, who was driving the car, also hummed along with the song. This slow-paced life made him feel that life had a lot more fun. Just as he was swaying slightly with the music, a woman in a red coat staggered out from the woods ahead. Hodder's face suddenly changed when he saw the figure that suddenly appeared. He turned the steering wheel frantically with both hands, and the brake of his right foot almost kicked into the fuel tank. With a sharp brake sound, the Cayenne stopped steadily a few centimeters away from the woman in red. Bang! But the woman actually fell heavily on his hood. A fraudster. Hodder was stunned for a moment, and his next thought was, Cayenne or suction device. Seeing that the woman didn't raise her head, Hodder hurriedly got out of the car. When he saw the woman lying on the hood, his face was stunned. The woman had blonde hair, and her milky white hair was about to burst out under the pressure of the t-shirt. The blood-red coat draped over her body made her even more beautiful. And she actually exuded a strong malt aroma. Hod was stunned for a long time before he murmured, "This is Wanda." It's actually Wanda. Hod took a step closer, and after a closer look, he confirmed that the person on his hood was actually Wanda. He never expected to meet Scarlet Witch in such a remote place. But she was lying on the hood, her breath was full of strong malt smell. Even without getting close, he knew that she must have drunk a lot. Call, you. How did you get so drunk? After hesitating for a long time, Hood pulled Wanda's hand to his shoulder, intending to help Wanda up. Wanda, who was like a puddle of mud, raised her blurry eyes, and the area around her eye sockets was slightly red. After noticing this strange face, Wanda asked with a choked voice, "You. Who are you?" "Miss Maximoff, you are drunk." Hod grabbed Wanda's wrist hanging on her shoulder and lifted her up. "No, I'm not drunk." Hearing this, Wanda broke away from Hood and fell directly onto the hood. She knelt on the ground. Shaking her head with sobs, a tear rolled down her cheek. "You need to rest." Looking at Wanda's appearance, Hod sighed and stepped forward to help. "I know that everyone doesn't like me." Wanda raised her head suddenly, her eyes were red under her messy hair, and tears had already covered her cheeks. Her trembling voice was filled with tears, and her pitiful face was filled with helplessness. Wanda's painful expression and words made Hood suddenly realize. The recent events must have dealt a heavy blow to Wanda. In order to avoid large-scale casualties, Wanda had to throw the crossbones that were about to explode into the air. The violent explosion directly broke through the building, resulting in a large number of casualties. It was obviously to protect more people, but what awaited her was not understanding, but endless pressure from public opinion. "Actually, you have done very well. No one hates you." Hood stepped forward, ready to help Wanda up, and persuaded her in a gentle tone. To put it bluntly, Wanda's spiritual world is much more fragile than other superheroes. It is inevitable that she will become like this. It is estimated that the public opinion on the internet has made her begin to doubt herself. Really? Wanda raised her head. There was a deep ravine under her snow-white neck. Because of this big move, the milky white snow was about to come out. Ahem. Facing this scene, Hood admired it gentlemanly, turned away, touched his nose subconsciously and coughed twice. It's not that he is lustful, but any normal man, if he doesn't appreciate the flowers in bloom, he is not romantic. "Are you lying to me?" Wanda noticed Hood's evasive look very keenly and asked with a questioning voice. If he was not lying to her, why would he avoid her gaze at this time? He must be just comforting her. How is it possible? Hodder looked at Wanda and said firmly, "No one is perfect, no one can firmly control the situation in their own hands. Although Wanda is very powerful, it does not mean that Wanda can do everything. Even the big purple potato spirit can't do what he wants, let alone her." "You are right." Wanda took a deep breath and nodded slowly. She had tried her best, but she really didn't expect. "Don't think too much, the ground is cold, let me help you get in the car first." Hodder came to Wanda's side and leaned over, ready to help Wanda stand up. Wanda nodded slightly at Hodder, who was so close to her, and did not struggle, but obediently let Hodder help her to the back seat. "Send her back to the Avengers first." Seeing Wanda leaning on the back seat with a wondering look, Hood shook his head helplessly. Who would have thought that he would meet Wanda in such a place? Just as he straightened Wanda's legs hanging outside the car door and was about to close the door, a cold and slender little hand suddenly grabbed his wrist. What's wrong? Facing Wanda with red cheeks, Hood asked with a puzzled look on his face. Are what you just said true? Am I really not wrong? Wanda's flashing eyes were like seeing her own rising star. After that incident, she was only scorned. The public's misunderstanding and the official's selfishness made her not know where to go. It was for this reason that she came to this secluded place to drink alone. But she didn't expect that at this time, the man in front of her actually untied her knot. He even stood firmly on her side. Yes, you have tried very hard, Hood said firmly. The next second, Wanda suddenly pulled back, and a flash of red light flashed in her hand. Then a force pushed him directly towards Wanda. In this unexpected moment, Hood could only support his hands on both sides of Wanda's shoulders. The two of them fell into the back seat of the car in an instant, and the faces close at hand exhaled a heavy breath. At this moment, what came to his face was not only the aroma of wine, but also a faint jasmine scent mixed with wood fragrance. The face so close at hand made him, who had been in the battlefield for a long time, actually beat faster. Wanda's blue eyes, as bright as the stars, locked his sight tightly like a black hole. Hodder opened his mouth slightly, wanting to say something. Don't talk. Wanda closed her eyes, her eyelashes trembling constantly, just like a flower letting him pick them. Hodd was stunned. He never thought that this would unfold like this. And if he couldn't understand Wanda's action, he would have lived in vain for so many years. He didn't hesitate too much and kissed her directly. When they separated again, the waterline was connected. Wanda blinked her wet eyes, which looked sparkling and like a lake of clean water. She was so pitiful. The corners of her eyes were still red and seductive. Perhaps she was nervous at this moment, and the corners of her charming lips were trembling. Now that things have come to this, if we back down, we would be like Lu Shahui. Bang! Hood clenched his teeth and turned over to close the car door. He has always adhered to a principle. If something is offered to you, there is no reason to refuse it. Seeing Hood's actions, Wanda exclaimed, What do you want to do? Under the setting sun, the afterglow of the sunset fell on the black roof. A black Cayenne fully demonstrated its proud shock absorber. Despite this, it still swayed with the rhythm. I don't know how much time has passed. A ray of blue dawn appeared on the horizon, shining through the mist onto the ground. The sun is out. When will the system give me a titanium alloy kidney? Hodder sat on the hood, holding a cigarette in his mouth. The corners of his tired face were slightly raised, and his left hand, which was supporting his body, was still trembling slightly. He struggled to take out Zipoo from his pocket. A flickering flame shone. Hodder will probably never forget this experience. Everything that happened last night was like a pop hit the earth, and a high-speed train passed through a narrow cave. It was a thunder and fire, even though there was an indestructible big stick. But this kidney has never been strengthened. Even so, he felt that this was an indescribable happiness. This is the Scarlet Witch, so big and smooth. Hodder took a deep puff of his cigarette and sighed from the bottom of his heart. As expected, when driving a Cayenne, girls will fall from the sky. Even a superhero fell directly. He turned his head and looked at the windshield behind him, only to see that the car was in a mess. Wanda collapsed in the back seat. Her skin was white and tender, and she closed her eyes tightly. It was unknown whether she fainted or fell asleep. A trace of crystal at the corner of her mouth flashed in the light, and her hands fell weakly from the seat. Ding! You have deeply understood Scarlet Witch Wanda. Get reward. Phoenix Force Fragment No will. Just as Hodd was enjoying the beauty of the smoke, the system panel suddenly appeared in front of him. The sudden appearance of the system panel made his tired nerves react for a while. Wait, I actually got the Phoenix Force Fragment. Hodd came back to his senses and was stunned for a moment. He never thought that he would get a reward for this. Because he had thought before that if he enjoyed life, this must be one of them. But no matter how he experienced life or how he ran all night with those big horses, he didn't get any rewards. But at this time, an accident happened, and even the rewards he got were more explosive than before. He even got the Phoenix Force directly. What is the Phoenix Force? The Phoenix Force is omnipotent and cosmic. It is the embodiment of the original cosmic life force and emotional power. No matter which universe it is in, the Phoenix Force is the most powerful existence. The Phoenix is one of the most terrifying existences in the Marvel multiverse. It can cut or regenerate any part of the universe. It can even completely destroy it and burn those things that should be eliminated. This is called the judgment of the Phoenix. There are descriptions that call the Phoenix Force the embodiment of the passion of all things. The spark brings life to the universe, and the flame will eventually destroy it. The Phoenix Force in its heyday is even comparable to the 5 great gods. Although what he has now is only a fragment of the Phoenix Force. But even with these fragments, he can clearly feel an extremely terrifying force flowing in his body. Even his body was washed by this power. The next second, a fiery red phoenix actually appeared in his mind. The moment this phoenix figure appeared, it rushed towards him with endless pressure. In just a moment, he felt that the pressure seemed to be able to shatter his will. At this moment, the phoenix's phantom just dissipated in his mind in an instant. Is this the power of the phoenix? Hodder's Adam's apple rolled up and down, and there was a hint of imperceptible fear in his muttering. Just now, he even suspected that the power of the phoenix would directly tear his consciousness apart and turn him into a vegetable. But fortunately, the power of the phoenix without consciousness is the real power of the phoenix. Otherwise, it will make people lose control of it at any time. Jean is the most typical example. But even she has never possessed the complete power of the phoenix. And in the movies of his original world, Jean's ability has been greatly weakened. In the end, she was defeated by Wolverine with love plus immortality. Although it was just a fragment of the power of the phoenix, it also gave Hodder the ability of the sub-father level. I didn't expect that I would get such a good reward just for a night of love. Hodder spit out a circle of eyes, flicked the cigarette butt in his hand, and the sparks drew an arc in the air. It must be said that this reward really surprised Hodder. Although he had won a lot of rewards before, these rewards were all very basic rewards. Even if he occasionally drew a self-defense type of reward, it was just some relatively basic and ordinary rewards. For example, Ultimate Fighting Master Fighting Skills, Ultimate Firearms Master, Micro Pistol, Cricket, and so on. But even so, compared with the current Phoenix Force, it is obviously not enough. What is going on here? Hodder put his right foot on the hood and supported his chin with his right hand to think secretly. The most important thing now is to find a way to figure out how the system makes judgments. If you can know exactly how to get higher level rewards, wouldn't it be awesome? Appearance, education, money, race. As ideas emerged one by one, they were rejected by Hodder one by one. Because in the past year, although he is not rich enough to rival a country, he has never lacked money. So he has already found the best in all aspects. If it was just because of these, it would be impossible that he had never triggered at once. Wait, at this moment, an idea came to mind. The system reward mechanism seems to be related to quality of life. But this time, Wanda and I were rewarded. To collect the fragments, I have to. Just like the many times he rode a big horse to fight, there was no reward effect. Hod looked at Wanda, who was snoring softly in the back seat. A thoughtful look appeared on his face. He suddenly jumped off the hood and moved his shoulder blades vigorously. In this case, we can only hold an umbrella and weather the Wussian rain together. The next morning, in the magnificently decorated room, on the soft big bed, Wanda bit her red lips and opened her eyes with a painful look. What came into view was the dazzling ceiling. Outside the French window, the midday sun shone directly on the earth. The smooth floor tiles outside the house reflected the dazzling light, just like the sparkling waves on the lake. Shish, it hurts. Then came the pain all over her body. It was like being run over by a heavy truck. Even her mouth was slightly painful. Wanda looked at this unfamiliar environment with a little confusion in her eyes. Where is this? Wanda touched her clothes and realized that her scarlet battle suit had been replaced with a men's shirt with a faint scent of sandalwood cologne. Her head was suddenly confused. I should have gone out for a drink yesterday afternoon. But after drinking, I seemed to run into hiss. Thinking of this, she felt dizzy. Wanda forced herself to continue to recall the details of last night. But her brows were furrowed, because her memory had stopped at this moment. Smelling the men's perfume coming from the white shirt, she had guessed that. I shouldn't be. After thinking about this, she couldn't help but panic. Combined with the pain in her lower body, she was sure what had happened. At this moment, footsteps were heard in the wooden corridor outside the door. The sudden sound caused Wanda's already panicked brain to suddenly crash. She hid herself in the quilt, leaving only a small gap. A young and handsome man in a bathrobe walked in with an aluminum tray in his hand. On it were butter sandwiches, fried eggs, and a glass of milk. The faint smell of butter also followed the smell into the gap of the cup. When Hood came in, he saw that the quilt on the bed was bulging, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise. "Are you awake?" Hood asked gently. Although they had only been together for a while, he knew that Wanda didn't like to cover herself with a blanket. In fact, after he came back at noon, every time he covered her with a blanket, it would be pulled away. So now he was sure that Wanda had woken up. "Did you do it?" Wanda puffed up her breath and poked her little face out of the gap. Although she had forgotten a lot of things, she could still vaguely remember Hood's face last night. "Yes, I did it." Hodder raised his lips and a sly smile appeared on his face. Wanda was angry and annoyed at the sight of this. Her face became red as if it had been smoked by hot steam. "You." Wanda's cheeks swelled up in anger, and she threw back the soft quilt. She turned over and was about to get out of bed when she felt a sharp pain. Hiss. Her face turned pale at this moment. She covered her abdomen and knelt on the bed. This tearing pain came from her abdomen, and she could only gasp. "Are you okay?" Hood quickly put down his breakfast and sat next to Wanda. "You are too crazy, you must have been hurt accidentally. After all, this has been going on since yesterday evening until almost noon the next day. It is inevitable that it will become like this, not to mention that he did an experiment this morning. It's a pity that if it happens too frequently, it seems that there is no way to trigger the effect for the second time. This should be the same as when he goes to taste coffee, he can only drink 1 cup a day. I guess it's to prevent him from being too greedy." "Me." Wanda pointed at herself angrily and spat out the last 2 words, "crazy." Although she vaguely remembered what happened, she couldn't remember the details. And saying this at this time made her feel ashamed and angry. "Does it hurt?" Hood didn't answer Wanda's question, but looked at her with a look of pity. It would have been better if he hadn't asked. When he asked this question, Wanda couldn't hold it anymore. "What do you think?" The corners of her clear eyes flashed with crystal clear tears. Even her breathing became extremely rapid at this time. This was like a spear like a dragon, how could it not hurt? She even suspected that this man was the incarnation of a construction site pile driver. He really didn't know what it meant to be gentle with women. "Why don't you eat something first to replenish your energy?" Hood pursed his lips and said with a slightly apologetic expression. Although it was not his initiative, it has become like this. It is only right for him to be a caring and warm man, after all, this is his best quality. Just when he stretched out his hand to pick up Wanda. "Buzz. Get out of my way." With a buzzing sound, he suddenly noticed the crimson light bursting out like a tide around him. The furniture around him was also shaking. Wanda's eyes flashed crimson, and her slender white arms swung violently. Boom! A crimson beam of rage mixed with heroism suddenly rushed towards Hood. At this moment, Wanda's eyes finally flashed a touch of softness. The original crimson beam also softened a lot at this time. But the red light was still surging and roaring. Naughty. Faced with the scarlet light that was coming like a surging tide, Hood simply raised his hand and waved it gently, and the scarlet light dissipated like smoke. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. This. How is it possible? Wanda's eyes widened, full of disbelief. Although she held back at the last moment because of what happened between the two of them. But even so, it is not something that an ordinary person can easily block. Not to mention that the action just now was full of random. "Which, you are so unreasonable. It was you who seduced me first. I am just an innocent victim. Even my innocence was taken away by you rudely. I haven't even asked you to take responsibility, and you're actually going to attack me." Hood looked aggrieved, covering half of his face and complaining unwillingly. I took the initiative. How can this be? It should be impossible." Wanda laughed in anger. When Ben started to refute, the vague memory in his mind became clear. Because in his mind, it was indeed she who brought Hodder into the car. And what happened afterwards was basically dominated by her. In an instant, her little face flushed, and a burning feeling surged in her heart. If I had known, I wouldn't have drunk such a strong malt liquor. Although it is my first time, I still want to take on the responsibilities that a man should take on. But you treated me like that, so you have to take responsibility for whatever you say. Huoda squeezed out a wronged look. But after saying this, he still silently added a sentence in his heart. This was really the first time he had done it with Chaoying, and he had never had such an exciting experience before. This feeling can only be described by the word, smooth. Even when he thought about it, he couldn't help licking his lips. I don't believe it's your first time. Wanda endured the pain, rolled her eyes impatiently, and pouted her lips slightly. She didn't believe that someone would be so familiar with it for the first time and make people feel so comfortable. Although it was her first time, it didn't mean that she was a fool. Whenever she thought of this scene, her cheeks were so red that they seemed to bleed. But the mood that followed made her feel more aggrieved. It was painful to make herself the target of public criticism because of the Crossbones incident. But she didn't expect that just wanting to numb herself with alcohol would turn out like this. The more she thought about it, the dimmer her eyes became. So you mean you won't be responsible for me? Hod was very sensitive to Wanda's change of mood, but he didn't stop talking. Wanda, who was originally feeling uncomfortable, suddenly pulled herself out of that mood when she heard this. She bit her lips with an ugly expression, and her eyes were red and watery. She looked shy, but she looked even more charming and attractive. Okay, Hood joked, then I will contact Mr. Tony Stark now and tell him what you did to me. Wanda's face turned pale. If she told Tony Stark about this, she would become a laughingstock to everyone in the world. But at this moment, Hood had already taken out his cell phone from his pocket. At this moment, Wanda's heart became extremely entangled. She stretched out her right hand, and a ray of scarlet light flew to Hood's temple. And the next second, Hood, who was holding the phone, was instantly stunned. Only, Wanda was very conflicted when she made this decision. Because this was something she would never forget in her life. But at this time, she could only delete the other party's memory in this way. She let out a long breath and threw all the distracting thoughts in her mind. The next second, she opened her eyes and peeked into Hood's spiritual world. Whoosh! What caught her eye was a fiery red phoenix. The flames soared into the sky, turning the entire white cloud into a sea of red clouds, and the terrifying pressure emanated from the phoenix. Is this his inner world? Wanda was stunned. The phoenix looked very powerful. The destructive aura it exuded seemed to be able to devour everything. But, Wanda actually felt very close to him, and it made her feel at ease. To be precise, after having a deep contact with Hood's heart, she felt a strong sense of intimacy with him. It was like a friend she hadn't seen for many years. This made her feel a strong desire to get close to Hood whenever she looked at him. Was it related to the phoenix? What are you doing? Suddenly, Hood, who was stunned, raised his hand and held Wanda's slender white hand. You. At this moment, Wanda's pupils kept trembling. This was simply impossible. You have to know that even Thor from Asgard couldn't resist her mind control. What's more, he was just an earthling. Miss Witch, it's fine if you are irresponsible, but you still want to take action. Hodder held Wanda's slender little hand and looked at Wanda in a shirt with a smile. It must be said that Wanda wearing a men's shirt actually had an indescribable sense of contrast. Have we met before? Wanda's eyes widened, and her bright eyes stared at Hood. For some reason, Hood gave her a sense of familiarity. And he also had some special abilities. Could it be that she had seen him in the Hydra laboratory? After all, the man in front of her was very capable. She kept thinking in her mind, but she had no relevant memory. No, Hod shook his head without hesitation, kneading Wanda's skin with his fingers. My dear witch lady, you can't get away with trying to get close to her. In fact, at the moment Wanda invaded just now, the power of the Phoenix automatically emerged to resist Wanda's power. The power of the Phoenix can resist all spiritual supplies, and the power of the Phoenix and the chaos magic in Wanda's body are one of the three most ancient energy bodies. It is also because of this reason that there is some connection and familiarity between them. Facing Hood's repeated questioning, Wanda lowered her head guiltily. In fact, she knew that if she hadn't used chaos magic at that time, it would never have turned out like this. But let her be responsible. How could she possibly give an answer to that? Although she was indeed unreasonable in this matter. Just when Wanda was thinking about how to answer, holding her wrist tightly, Hood, who was nearly 1.9 meters tall, suddenly moved forward and almost pressed on her. The strong hormones hit Wanda in the face, making her heart beat fast for a moment. She looked up and said nervously, "Don't mess around." Some inappropriate thoughts about this also came to my mind. How long has it been since then, and now I have another thought. What do you mean by messing around? Aren't you supposed to be responsible? Hood grinned and lowered his head, meeting Wanda's gaze. Wanda avoided Hood's gaze in panic, hesitating and unable to speak. Ding dong. At this time, the doorbell rang. "Mr. Hodder, Mr. Tony Stark is here." The maid of the manor called out from outside. "Why is Tony here?" When Wanda heard the name, her mind went blank and the hairs on her back stood up. She couldn't imagine what would happen if Tony Stark knew about this. Hood looked at Wanda's nervous expression and subconsciously smiled. He let go of Wanda's hand and rubbed Wanda's fluffy hair. "Don't worry, he came to see me." A long time ago, Hood had already obtained a share of Stark Group through system rewards. He was also a small shareholder in it and had contact with Tony from time to time. That's good. Wanda breathed a sigh of relief. Although she didn't know why Tony Stark was here, as long as he wasn't coming for her, it was fine. But what Hood said next almost made her cry. "You seem very lucky." Hodder moved closer to Wanda, hooked her fair and tender chin. "You must be obedient, you don't want Tony to know about this, right?" It must be said that looking at Wanda's angry and furious look, he felt an inexplicable pleasure. Facing the burning breath, Wanda blinked her eyes and bit her lower lip, not daring to resist at all. This guy was too despicable, and the threatening words were simply boom boom boom. "Mr. Hodder, Mr. Stark is already in the reception room on the first floor." The maid's voice sounded outside the door. "I understand," Hood responded, then turned and stared at Wanda. "My lovely witch lady, this is your last chance, otherwise I will go to Tony to complain." "Complain? I should be the one making the complaint, right?" Wanda's breathing became rapid. The undulating hillside looked particularly attractive against the shirt. Although she was indeed more proactive, why was it the other party who took advantage of her, and she even became the other party's handle? She simply couldn't understand why the man in front of her was so self-righteous. "You decide for yourself." Hodder looked at the Scarlet Witch unscrupulously. It must be said that because of the other party's identity, he actually felt a long-lost spiritual pleasure. "Okay, I got it." Wanda snorted, looked around, and found the banknotes on the bedside table. She crawled to the bedside table and picked up a pen and paper. As soon as she turned around, she saw Hood's scorching eyes staring at her. "Rogue," Wanda cursed in a low voice, and then quickly wrote down a series of phone numbers on a piece of paper. "This is my phone number, you can call me if you have anything." Hood took out his phone and dialed the number with a distrustful look. "You keep digging, pushing, driving like a hammer hitting in my headspace." After the phone on Wanda's desk rang, he hung up the phone with confidence. Wanda was stunned at first, and then asked angrily, "You still don't believe me?" "This is my first time after all, so I have to be cautious no matter what." Hodder proudly shook the phone in his hand. "Where are my clothes?" Feeling the friction on her chest, Wanda pouted and asked. She really didn't want to stay here for a moment. "The clothes have been washed and placed in the closet." "Are you leaving now?" "Tony is at the door." Hodder raised his lips and glanced outside the door with a half-smile. "I can go through the window." Wanda pointed at the window. She didn't want Tony to see her in this situation. The whole team was at the center of public opinion. It was obviously not fair for her to show up here and do this. "Okay, the phone must be kept open." Hodder did not forget to remind Wanda again, and then stood there motionless, looking at Wanda. "Turn around." With just one look, Wanda had guessed what Hood was thinking. "This is my home, and I remember it." Hodder tapped his temple with his index finger. "You." Wanda gritted her teeth in anger. Every time she talked to Hood, she felt like she had met her nemesis. She waved her right hand, and the quilt was like a curtain in front of her. She quickly changed into the scarlet battle suit. Hood watched Wanda jump down from the window carefully, like a thief, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise. How come this is like committing a crime? Ding. You and Scarlet Witch Wanda have established a special relationship between man and woman. Get reward. God-level magic talent. Wanda is really my lucky star. Hearing the reminder sound echoing in his mind, Hood was in a very happy mood. The witch really has a lucky attribute. She brought him 2 surprises in just one day. Next time, I must reward her heavily. The God-level magic talent, as the name suggests, is to give him a supernatural understanding of magic. In the future, he will be able to learn magic smoothly. Ta. There were hurried footsteps in the corridor. Hood. Tony Stark's slightly tired voice came from outside the door. Why haven't you come out for so long? Are you having a tryst with a beauty in there? He waited outside for several minutes but didn't see Hood coming down, so he simply came up and urged him to come. Yes. Wanda casually opened the door and took a deep breath with a smile on his face. There is still the faint fragrance she left in this room. You live a leisurely life. Tony Stark, who used to be a playboy, couldn't help but sigh when he saw Hood's leisurely appearance. He is indeed a superhero now, but the burden on him is much heavier than before. In addition, now that he has Pepper, he can't even think about going out to fool around. Okay, let's go downstairs and talk. Hood adjusted the belt on his bathrobe, patted Tony Stark on the shoulder and walked downstairs first. As Hood moved, Tony Stark glanced at the open door. There was no one in the messy room, only a shirt scattered on the bed. The floor-to-ceiling window not far away was open, and the curtains fluttered slightly with the breeze blowing in. Tony Stark shook his head and didn't care anymore, but followed Hood to the living room. A sofa inlaid with gold edges was placed on the hand-woven classical pattern carpet, and the smell of aromatherapy echoed in the living room. Mr. Tony, do you want to drink or something else? Sitting on the soft and comfortable European sofa, Hood spread his hands and asked lazily. Liquor. Tony Stark hesitated for a moment and finally shook his head and said, give me a cup of tea. He had to stay awake now. Hood just gave the maid a look, and soon 2 cups of Earl Grey tea were placed on the marble table in front of them. I didn't expect that the famous superhero Mr. Tony Stark would not sleep in the middle of the day and actually come to my place. After the maid left, Hood looked at Tony Stark with a teasing look. Tony's mental state has been much worse recently, and his eyes are full of fatigue. Hood, stop joking. Facing the teasing, Tony's tired face forced out an ugly bitter smile. I'm not in the mood to sleep now, let alone sleep until noon. In the past, he did not necessarily get up until noon, but it was unknown how long ago. Now, the only thing left on his face was the deep dark circles under his eyes. Actually, I have heard about the incident in Germany, and I was just about to go find you. Hodder put down his crossed legs, his lazy expression became more serious at this time, and he got straight to the point. Well, you know Ross, that old guy in the military before. At this point, Tony Stark gritted his teeth, picked up the teacup and drank it all, then said, now this guy is the Minister of National Martial Arts in the National Martial Arts Garden. What does he want to do? Hodder nodded in agreement. He didn't have a very good impression of this guy. If the current situation cannot be resolved, the Avengers will be directly controlled by the government. Tony Stark put down his teacup, rubbed his brows and sighed. He was now caught in the middle, and no matter which side he chose, he felt extremely embarrassed. Ha ha, Hodder sneered disdainfully. Do they really care about this? This group of ruthless politicians are just looking for an excuse to control the Avengers. These guys are all acting for their own selfish interests. And he is also very clear that in this incident, besides Wanda being the biggest victim in public opinion, Tony Stark behind the scenes is undoubtedly the person with the most pressure, because this matter is caused by him. He needs to be responsible for the entire Avengers alliance and clean up the consequences and impacts caused by this matter. And Lord Ross had this intention a long time ago, intending to let the Avengers be managed by the government. Although Tony Stark did not object to this decision, Steve Rogers and others did not want to do so. This also made Tony Stark very embarrassed now. I also know that those guys just want to take advantage of the Avengers. Tony Stark already knew this, and the German incident was just an excuse. The higher-ups have been thinking about how to control the Avengers. After all, before this, although the Avengers were the official organization of the organization, they would not obey anyone. All plans and implementation plans were made by the Avengers themselves. This obviously made them dissatisfied, and they even felt that the Avengers were out of control. For the guys above, uncontrollable power is simply unbearable. What happened this time just gave them an opportunity to make use of the issue. So what are you doing this time? Hodder took a sip from his teacup and looked at Tony Stark with a puzzled look. Brother, I came to you to complain and to ask you if you have any solution. Tony Stark looked helpless. He knew that Hood was much smarter than ordinary people, so he came to ask Hood's opinion. Maybe there will be unexpected surprises. Public opinion. Hodder paused and explained. The main contradiction this time is the pressure of public opinion. If we can change people's view of the Avengers, everything will be much easier. You should also know that the current public opinion is not in your favor. After all, if there were no hints from the people above, this matter would never have caused such a big impact. But, it's not that easy. Tony Stark said bitterly. It's hard to change the direction of the wind now. In fact, he knew this, but it was difficult to change it. Hod leaned forward and tapped the table lightly with his fingers. In fact, the main point of public opinion is Wanda. The mistake of the Crossbones explosion caused the long-accumulated public anger to explode in an instant. If public anger is compared to a barrel of explosives, then public opinion is a chain of fire that ignites the barrel of explosives. You mean, changing Wanda's public image? But Wanda is in a very unstable mood right now. Last night, it seems that she didn't return to the base. I'm a little worried that she can't bear the pressure. Tony Stark said what he was thinking with a thoughtful look on his face. Cough, cough, cough. Hod was drinking Earl Grey tea and he choked and coughed repeatedly when he heard this. He looked at Tony with a complicated expression and thought to himself, she definitely didn't return. I played poker with her all night last night. Are you okay? Tony noticed the surprise on his friend's face. It's okay. Hod wiped the water stain with a tissue and said, you can only get the people to support Wanda again, and then this matter will be solved. Yeah, but Wanda can't fully control her abilities. I'm worried that she'll make another mistake when she goes on a mission, and this incident will have a big impact on her. Maybe, she just needs some time and a little help. Tony Stark has never seen Wanda so lost. Even during this period, even if he saw Wanda, Wanda always looked depressed. No matter how he tried to persuade her, there was not much effect. Hood was thoughtful after hearing this. That is, maybe he could help Wanda. Although they just met by chance yesterday and there were some misunderstandings. But he got the Phoenix Force fragment and God-level magic talent from Wanda anyway. What's more, there are more treasures in Wanda that are worth digging deep. Buzz. At this time, the watch on Tony Stark's wrist flashed blue light twice. He raised his hand and took a look, and there was a bit more melancholy in his eyes. Thanks for listening to me complain, Howard. Steve has been in a bad mood lately and is even unwilling to sit down and talk. I have some things to deal with now, let's talk another day. After saying that, Tony Stark sighed and stood up to say goodbye. Although Hood did not give any specific plan. But after saying this, Tony Stark's mood also calmed down a lot at this time. When people are under too much pressure, they basically need others to listen to them. And Hood has always been his most loyal listener. Okay, you're welcome to come visit us when you're free. Hodder also stood up and said goodbye to Tony before returning to the room. System. Open the panel. After sitting in the chair, Huoda thought about it, and the system's virtual panel appeared in front of him. God-level magic talent, it allows you to have an extraordinary understanding of magic, and you don't need to borrow magic power from the dimensional demon. This simple introduction is enough to make Horde excited. Wanda, you are really a lucky star. It is definitely another God-level reward. The God-level magic talent is extremely important to Horde. Phoenix power, chaos magic, and fairy power are all three ancient energy bodies. They are familiar with each other, and they are all the best energy bodies for practicing magic. Having one of them, even if it is just a small fragment, will have extremely strong power. Now with the blessing of the God-level magic talent, it will make rapid progress in practice. Horde now has the God-level magic talent plus the power of the Phoenix. It is simply a holy body for magic practice. Even Ned Leeds' talent is far inferior. The most terrifying thing is that he doesn't even need to draw power from the demons of other dimensions. The magic in the Marvel Universe is not created out of thin air, but draws power from the demons of other dimensions. And this also requires a corresponding price. Only the wizards and the sworns of Kamar Taj are allowed to borrow magic power from the dimensional demon Vishanti. It's just that the cost of borrowing magic power from Vishanti is very small, so it is white magic. If it is black magic, it will cost a heavy price, even the soul. But Horde doesn't have to pay any price. Wait, that's not right. Just as Hod was excited, the smile on his face suddenly stopped. Because he remembered the most important thing. Even if I have god-level magic talent, it's useless. I don't have a magic book. This is equivalent to having a gun but no ammunition. Although when playing with Wanda, it is indeed possible to use magic to deal with Wanda's chaos magic. But this is just using the power of the Phoenix to crush it directly. Although it can be mobilized, it is also purely the use of energy. It seems that we have to think of a way. Huoda sat cross-legged on the chair, thinking secretly in his heart. If I remember correctly, the Holy Earth seems to be in New York. If I remember correctly, a temple of Kamar Taj is in Manhattan, New York. According to the timeline, the future Sorcerer Supreme Doctor Strange is also in the Holy Earth. The Holy Earth must have the magic book he needs. The Holy Earth is one of the important temples. In the Marvel world, it is the main residence and base of Doctor Strange. It is a center dedicated to Doctor Strange and his team to study magic, research and protect the Earth. And its biggest role is to provide a safe place for Doctor Strange and other Guardians to train and store knowledge. To protect the world from the invasion of evil forces. But how to get in is a problem. Hod stroked his stubble and thought to himself. If I remember correctly, part of the interior of the Holy Earth is open to the public. You can buy a ticket and join a guided tour to enter the temple. Although Kamar Taj does not get involved in the secular world, it also needs to make money. Maybe this will give you a chance to get in touch with those magic books. Afternoon. A building in Manhattan exuding a quaint atmosphere. Everyone, slow down, don't be in a hurry, line up and follow me in one by one. The fat man in the lead was waving the small red flag in his hand. He forced a smile on his honest face and led a group of people inside. He seemed to be a tour guide, but the style of his clothes was extremely simple. At first glance, it looked like the clothes of monks in the past. Although it seemed a bit out of tune with modern society. But when I saw the words, "Welcome to the Magic Library," on the plaque next to the door, everything seemed to make sense. So professional, even their work clothes looked so immersive. The little girl held her mother's hand and exclaimed with wide eyes. Everything around them was amazing to the tourists. This kind of ancient building was something they had never seen before. King, at the end of the team, Hood, wearing a casual black sportswear, looked at the fat man leading the way. He really didn't expect that the great wizard who managed the Kamar Taj library would have to come out in person to receive guests. This made him sigh at the impermanence of the world. The king led everyone into the temple. The ancient and long-standing atmosphere hit them. What caught the eye was the ancient European style, and there was a magnificent ceiling on the top of the hall. Around the library, there were many apprentices in monk robes who were cleaning with their heads down. Everyone. Wong stopped and turned to the tourists and said, "You can read the books on the first floor, but be careful not to damage them, otherwise you will have to pay for it. This magic book is just for people to read." Hod looked around with a surprised face, and couldn't help but feel a little confused. But in just a moment, he realized why he did that. Let alone other things, a genius like Doctor Strange needs to receive guidance from the great wizard before he can understand it. Not to mention a group of ordinary people who have no talent for cultivation. And from the current performance, it can be seen that the magic books on the first floor are not that important. It is estimated that even if they are copied by outsiders, there will be no impact. Otherwise, the king would not say that the damage only requires compensation. Most of the people who come here to visit are magic fans. After getting permission, the tourists all dispersed. They opened the books and flipped through the magic books on the bookshelf. They were very curious about these books for learning magic. But most people just took a quick look after flipping through the books. They couldn't understand the contents at all, so they just put them back. Hod followed the others and stopped in front of the bookshelf, pulling out a magic book and checking it out. On the side, Wong stopped and watched quietly. Seeing the confused looks on everyone's faces, he couldn't help but shake his head in disappointment and sighed helplessly. There are indeed very few people in this world who can master magic and feel magic. What's that expression on your face? Do you expect a group of children and a group of middle school students to understand ancient books? Just as Wong was sighing, a voice suddenly came from the side. The sudden voice made Wong tremble violently, and the flesh on his cheeks could not help but move slightly. He turned his head and saw a man wearing a red cloak standing silently behind him. This man was very tall and thin, and looked to be in his 30s. The beard on his cheeks was slightly yellow. He had a typical British appearance, and even his gestures were a little elegant. "Stephen, you walk without making any sound." Wong couldn't help but complain. He didn't even notice Stephen Strange appeared behind him. "I came to take a look." Dr. Strange. Stephen Strange glanced at the crowd coldly and said arrogantly, "Even I can't teach myself, let alone them." His talent gave him the capital to be proud. After all, he was the most promising disciple of Ancient One. In his opinion, Wang's actions were just a waste of time. When he first started learning magic, he made rapid progress, but this was only possible with a guide. Even if these ordinary people have some magical talents, it is impossible for them to learn by themselves without the guidance of a guide. "I'm just trying to find some talent." Wong shrugged and spread his hands helplessly. "Although the possibility is very low, who can say for sure? Don't waste your time. Use this time to buy me a sandwich later." As Stephen spoke, he fumbled in his pockets, paused, and said with a straight face, "Wait until those guys pay the sightseeing fee, and then you can just deduct it." "You, Buzz." Wong was about to say something when a strange noise suddenly sounded around him. Suddenly, a violent buzzing sound resounded throughout the temple. "Wow, oh my god, what is going on? Look, there really is magic in this world. Mom, this is really amazing. I want to learn it too." Quote. Visitors who were reading books around were all shocked by the scene in front of them. This was the first time they had seen such a scene in real life. "What's going on?" Stephen frowned and looked towards the direction of the sound. But when he saw the scene, his blue pupils shrank sharply. He saw a dazzling and brilliant ancient golden light, like a meteor flying in the night sky, unfolding a circular portal in the air. And standing in front of this golden light was a young man with a calm expression. It was the dimensional gate. What made their heartbeats even faster was, he actually opened the dimensional door with his bare hands. He didn't use the power of the hanging ring. What's going on? Why did the dimensional door appear? Stephen stared at everything that happened in front of him. His pupils were constantly trembling, and all his attention was focused on the young man's hand. Because he clearly saw that there was no ring on the young man's hand. He actually opened the latitude door with his bare hands. Is this world really crazy? Wong, tell me if this is a dream or not. He now doubted if he hadn't woken up yet. You know, the hanging ring is the key to help wizards concentrate their magic power. Without the hanging ring, it is almost impossible to control magic. Unless one has a very high understanding of magic, and at the same time has a natural affinity for magic. But, this is only in theory. How could there be such a person in the world? This is simply a magic saint. Wong spoke for a long time before saying, "You are not dreaming." He had just hit his thigh hard. Unexpectedly, a magic genius really appeared. Wang's eyes were about to pop out. He knew very well that he was just killing time. That's why he would check if anyone had a talent for magic every time he took people sightseeing. But he really didn't expect that a magic genius would appear at this time. When he saw this scene, his mind was almost blank, and he didn't come back to his senses for a long time. The tourists around the temple looked at the picture with flowing light, and their eyes were about to emit golden light. "This is so beautiful. I didn't expect that someone could cast such a spell. I remember he seemed to come in with us and he was also one of the tourists. I originally thought these books were fake, but I didn't expect that someone actually learned magic. This shouldn't be the case. If that were the case, I should have used magic just now." Quote. Originally, most people came to the magic library for entertainment. Although there were magic books, they would not take them too seriously. But they did not expect that someone among their group of tourists had learned magic. This made them unable to help but follow Horde's actions and try. But this was only to obtain the ability to cast magic in this situation. I didn't expect that it would work on the first try. Hodder looked at the dimensional door that opened in front of him, his mouth twitched slightly and he muttered subconsciously. Just now, he casually took out an ancient magic book, and it happened to record the spell of the dimensional door. I thought that I needed the help of the hanging ring to open the dimensional door. After reading it roughly, I started to try it according to the above content. He just imagined the opening position, and then gently drew a circle with his right hand, and the golden light appeared instantly. He didn't expect it to be so easy to open. But he vaguely guessed that it was probably because of the magic ability in his body. Coupled with this god-level magic talent, it was so easy to achieve. The first time, although Huode muttered to himself in a low voice, it still reached Stephen and Wang's ears. After hearing this, Stephen, who seemed calm, almost knelt on the ground. You told me this and it worked the first time. Stephen clearly remembered that he was under the guidance of Master Gu Yi. He practiced day and night, and spent a lot of time and energy to practice opening the dimensional door. In order to be able to do this, he had been enduring the double pressure of spirit and body. But even so, he didn't succeed. In the end, he was sent to the snowy mountains and opened the dimensional door when he was forced into a desperate situation. The words of the young man in front of him were like a steel knife, forcing him, who was always calm, to doubt his life. One time, how dare he say such a thing? This is simply the most terrifying monster in the world. Incredible, is this a true genius? The king's Adam's apple rolled up and down, and he looked at Stephen beside him with a strange look. Before, Ancient One said that Stephen Strange was a wizard with extraordinary talent that only appears once in 100 years. Under his guidance, Stephen Strange did show a strong talent. But compared with the young man in front of him, he was not on the same level at all. For a moment, he even doubted whether he had found the wrong person. The person mentioned by the Supreme Sorcerer should be the young man in front of him. This is simply a monster. Wang has lived for hundreds of years, but this is the first time he has seen such a scene. This is more than just shocking. If we use the more popular words now, it is explosive. Who is this guy? Stephen took a deep breath, his voice trembling slightly. His brain was spinning rapidly, but he couldn't think of any background of the young man in front of him. If this was really the first time, it was estimated that the Ancient One would need to change the position of the Supreme Master's successor to the young man in front of him. Just as they were amazed, Horde had an idea and stopped his action at this time. The dimensional gate that was shining with golden light also slowly disappeared. I remember it should be like this. Horde frowned, recalling the words in the magic book. He stretched out his hands and suddenly opened them. The temperature in the temple also dropped rapidly at this time. Blizzard. Horde took a deep breath and said to himself. The next second, a huge circular golden magic circle appeared above the library. As the golden light flickered, the dazzling light filled the entire library. Everyone widened their eyes. Whoosh, and the next second, snowflakes fell from the sky. As the snowflakes fell, it turned into a blizzard in an instant. The blizzard, accompanied by strong winds, instantly blew the scattered papers and books in the library away. The tourists who were watching, the air they exhaled turned into mist in an instant. The fierce wind forced them to bend down and try their best to resist the strong wind. In just a moment, the indoor temperature of 18 dropped sharply to -3. In just a blink of an eye, the entire library was covered with snowflakes like a storm. Everywhere you look, it's all white. Snowflakes were flying everywhere in the hall. After just 10 seconds of heavy snow, the thick snow had already reached above the knees. The cold was like a maggot in the tarsal bones, making everyone's face pale. They looked up at this almost miraculous scene, and frost had already formed on their eyelashes. The biting cold air went down their throats. Is this magic? Is this God? The combination of beauty and coldness actually appears in this library. Mom, I'm so cold, but this is so beautiful. If I go back and tell my classmates, they will definitely go crazy with jealousy. Quote. Although the cold made them shiver, the tourists at the scene did not leave. This is a scene that everyone will never forget. No one knows whose flash suddenly flashed at this time. The dazzling flash made everyone react instantly at this time. They took out their mobile phones and cameras hanging on their chests. With trembling hands, they kept pressing the door. Hey, look here. At this moment, a magnetic and deep voice attracted everyone's attention. The levitation cloak carried Steven into the air. He stretched out his right hand and snapped his fingers. White light instantly burst out from his fingertips, and the dazzling white light illuminated the library. The tourists who saw this scene closed their eyes and collapsed directly into the snow. At this time, only Hood and the staff of the temple were still standing. What are you doing? Are you going to kill someone to silence them? Hodder, who was admiring his masterpiece, saw the tourists lying on the ground, and turned to look at Steven Strand floating in the air. Don't worry, it's just a little spell to make them sleep. Steven looked down at Hood, who was standing in the middle of the library, and said, let them have a good sleep, just think of it as a dream. I thought you were jealous of my talent and wanted to kill me to silence me. Hodder teased calmly. He knew what kind of person Steven was and was not afraid of him at all. Would I be jealous of you? Steven's face darkened instantly after being touched, and he gritted his teeth and said, these are all the things I have left over. Young man, you are still far behind. That's enough. Steven, stop pretending. Wong interrupted Steven impatiently and looked at Hood vigilantly. Who are you? Although this young man is very talented, Wong will never take it lightly before he knows him clearly. Me. Hodder turned his back to the two of them and casually put the magic book in his hand back on the bookshelf. He said calmly, Hodder, an ordinary person. Ding. You have learned the first magic in your life. Reward. Scroll of Sithorn, fragment. Scroll of Sithorn. Isn't that the predecessor of the Dark Book? Hod didn't expect that he would get this reward. An ordinary person. Wong snorted coldly, and then said, a wealthy businessman. A businessman, a mountain climber, or a champion in a shooting competition. As expected of a great wizard prophet, he knew my identity so quickly. As Huoda spoke, he turned back to look at Wong. But when he saw Wong, his voice stopped abruptly. Because Wong was holding a touchscreen phone and reading the information on the web page seriously. No, is it really okay for the mage to use such a plain and unpretentious method? Wong raised his head and saw Huoda's surprised look and smiled. I seem to have seen you in the newspaper before. Yes, there was. Hod watched Wong put his phone back into his arms, then he calmed down and nodded slowly. After obtaining the system, he wanted to get more surprise rewards. So he tried many exciting projects once, and he was tired of wingsuit flying. Steven, who was listening to the conversation between the two, twitched his mouth slightly. He felt bad after hearing the dense titles. He couldn't win in terms of talent, which meant that he was not on the same level as his previous life experience. Cough cough. Steven clenched his fist, put it in front of his mouth, coughed twice, and slowly dropped it to the ground. You are very good, but magic is not as easy as you think. Wong saw at a glance that Steven was going to show off again, so he simply stepped aside silently. Is it difficult? Hodder looked at Steven not far away with a half-smile. Facing Hodder's ridicule, Steven Strand said calmly with his hands behind his back, well, if you want to be an excellent wizard, you must have an excellent guide. After that, he waved his right hand casually. A light breeze blew up out of thin air, and the breeze carried the snow in the library up. At first glance, it looked like a silver-white gauze curtain floating around the library. When the snow was lifted up, it slowly disappeared with the breeze. In just a blink of an eye, the snow that covered the library just now had disappeared. After doing all this, Steven Strand slowly put his hands behind his back again, and even raised his chin slightly. It must be said that this operation was very impressive. But Hodder just nodded slowly and uttered a word, oh. But what was worth his admiration was that Steven was worthy of being the successor of the Supreme Wizard, and he really had some tricks. Do you want me to be your guide? Steven Strand almost couldn't hold back when he heard this indifferent response. No, I'm pretending to be so bossy, and you just say one thing. No, I have something to do, so I will leave first. Hod shook his head. He just got a scroll of Sithon. He has to go back and study it carefully. That thing is of the same level as the Supreme Sorcerer's Book of Vishanti. Ah, Steven heard this. Everyone was in a bad mood. This was completely different from what he had expected. Shouldn't he come up and beg for his guidance? And at this time, Hood actually turned around and walked out the door. "Don't go," Stephen said in a hurried tone. "You really don't want to become my disciple and become a wizard. This is a rare genius. It would be a pity if he left now." "I don't want to." Hood shook his head without thinking and said, "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone what happened today." Unless he was crazy, he would go to the snowy mountains with these people to suffer. It would be better to spend this time looking for his baby Wanda to have a few in-depth exchanges of love. Stephen saw that Hood was about to leave, and was about to walk forward quickly when he was stopped by Wong beside him. "Mr. Hood, if you want to learn magic in the future, you can come anytime." Hearing this, Hood paused, nodded seriously, and left. After Hodder left, Stephen Strang still couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. "Stephen, it seems that you are still not attractive enough." Wong held back his laughter and teased in a teasing tone. "What does this have to do with my attractiveness?" "It's because he doesn't want to learn magic." Stephen Stellan stiffened his neck and refused to admit it. He was a top genius, so how could he refuse this idea? He learned it by accident after just one look. Wong looked up at the scenery outside the window, feeling the chill in the air and sighed. "We may have met a genius, we must tell the Supreme Mage quickly. No one can hide it from Master Gu Yi." Stephen smiled and shook his head and continued, "She may have known it." In the Cayenne with a starry sky roof, Huoda unfolded a Yongping scroll, which was filled with various strange ancient texts. "Is this the scroll of Sithoun?" He frowned slightly and looked at the ancient text on it carefully. The scroll of Sithoun was fabricated by the ancient god Sithoun. In fact, it is the predecessor of the Dark Book. It records in detail the most terrifying black magic in the world. And its influence is extremely great. Anyone who has read it will be corrupted by it, losing their souls as possessed by Sithoun. It was once the source of the Book of the Dead and the Book of Curses. If the Book of Vishandi, practiced by the Supreme Mage, is the 9 Yang divine art, then the Scroll of Sithoun is the 9 Yin manual. The two books carry completely opposite and opposing magic. Therefore, those who practice Sithoun's magic will be corrupted, and even the mind will be dark and twisted. But Hood doesn't have to worry about this problem at all. He doesn't need to absorb Sithoun's power to get the Scroll of Sithoun. Therefore, Sithoun has no way to have any influence on Hood. If I remember correctly, there is something in this that can help Wanda stabilize her control of her abilities. Hood glanced at the Scroll of Sithorn and thought to himself. In the original movie, Wanda used the Scroll of Sithorn to practice chaos magic. As long as she practiced a part of it, she would not be affected by too many attacks. It seems that we still have to find a way to help Wanda through the Scroll of Sithorn. Hodder thought to himself after putting the Scroll of Sithorn back into the system. Control ability is very important for Wanda now. Because in the incident in Germany, part of the reason for the failure of the action was that Wanda had too little control over her ability. With the real strength of Scarlet Witch, controlling the explosion is not a problem at all. Why not? Go pick up Wanda now. Hodder thought of Wanda's appearance, and the corners of his mouth rose proudly. Wanda's expression would surely be very interesting after seeing him. It must be said that he was very funny sometimes. He took out his mobile phone and dialed Wanda's number without hesitation. Avengers base, Wanda's room. Wanda curled up in the quilt, with the scene of last night constantly flashing in her mind. Although she said she had always wanted to forget, the pain in her body kept reminding her again and again. This Hood, he didn't even introduce himself. If the maid hadn't called Hood's name, Wanda wouldn't have known who this man was. And for some reason, an indescribable feeling kept lingering in her heart. Buzz buzz buzz. The silent phone kept vibrating on the bed. "Hello, who is this?" Wanda answered the phone with a tired tone. "My lovely little witch, have you forgotten me so quickly?" When Hood's voice came from the other end, Wanda almost jumped up. She never thought that Hood would call her so soon. Why are you calling me?" Wanda's voice was stuttering. "What do you think?" Hood's voice was full of ridicule. Wanda was stunned for a moment, and her face flushed after a moment. Did you call me just to act like a hooligan?" "I was just thinking about my witch." Hodder's deep and distinctive voice came. "It's your witch, don't talk nonsense." Hodder's words just now made Wanda's heart beat faster. It must be said that Hodder really occupies a very important position in her heart. No matter which girl it is impossible to forget this experience. Oh, Hod lowered his seat, his mouth curled up. So you mean you are irresponsible? Then I will tell Mr. Tony Stark. Listening to Wanda's angry voice like a kitten, he could imagine what she looked like. What are you going to do? Wanda heard the sneer from Hod and asked in a vigilant tone. I just want to talk to you about our previous relationship. When Wanda spoke, his voice was deliberately prolonged. You just want. You are an animal with a head full of dirt. Wanda could even imagine Hod's smirk. She was so angry that she clenched her cup tightly. Where are you? Hodder asked further. Okay. Wanda gritted her teeth and said, go to the back door of the base. I'll wait for you there. The two white buildings are connected by an aerial corridor, and there are two large helipads in the base. Looking down from above, it looks like a connected V. This is the Avengers base, sponsored by the Stark Group. Me Marchosen Saberseimbestinstert, Tetamikoras, 3NYT, Alaregalast. Tadito Dolamorke Pudadartimero Bast. Hod was driving the Cayenne on the way to the Avengers base, swaying slightly with the rhythm. At this moment, he saw a group of people holding signs in the middle of the road ahead. Superheroes, get out of New York. We don't need these hypocritical violent lunatics. Wanda, get out of this city, she is an absolute devil. They are just using the name of justice to hurt everyone at will. Quote. These people held signs and shouted while protesting in the direction of the Avengers base. Hodder was speechless when he saw this scene. He had to say that the people here were really simple and honest. Not to mention Wanda, even he would have a headache seeing this scene every day. And these poor people were just blinded by the media. No matter which side they were just victims. The real beneficiaries were only the top executives. This was the truth of this world. Only by creating contradictions could they protect their interests. Oh, poor Wanda. Wanda turned down the volume of the music, and his joyful mood also became slightly lost at this time. She was just a poor person, but she had to endure such grievances. Power. Although she had power, her heart was actually as fragile as that of an ordinary person. Buzz. At this moment, Wanda's phone vibrated slightly. Wanda. I'm at the back door. After seeing the message above, Hod drove the car and turned into a small road. But just a few steps away, a figure rushed out of the woods. Squeak. At this critical moment, Hod stepped on the brakes and... What's going on? He raised his head and frowned, looking ahead. Isn't it that the charm of the Cayenne appeared in the grove? At this moment, several other people rushed out of the woods. Among these people, there were men and women, with white paint on their faces. Without saying a word, they frantically slapped the car windows and Hod, grinning at the window. Are they planning to rescue me? Hodder was confused as he watched this scene. He had no idea what these lunatics were doing. Even if it was a zombie crisis, it wouldn't be that morbid. Get out here, you fool. You're in league with the Avengers. I see, you must be planning to enter the Avengers base from the back. Get that Wanda out now. Otherwise you're dead. Don't think you can escape punishment, you murderous demons. Looking at these crazy people, Wanda gritted his teeth, and his forehead gradually became swollen and blue veins appeared. You are really courting death. In his opinion, these guys are fighting so hard just because they have been paid. It is clear that the people above are deliberately leading the rhythm, intending to use this method to make the Avengers compromise. He unbuckled his seatbelt and rolled up his sleeves. At this moment, his phone suddenly vibrated. Wanda, ignore them, go back. Hod looked at the message and knew clearly that Wanda was looking at him. After quickly clicking a few times on the phone screen, he sent the message. Hod. They should suffer a little. The Avengers cannot take action for justice, but he is different. He is not a member of the Avengers. Justice. Moral kidnapping. As long as there is no morality, no one can kidnap. Hod opened the car door and walked out. His burly figure brought a strong sense of oppression to these people at this moment. I'm out, you guys come on. Hod stared at the so-called protesters with a cold expression. Facing the pressure from Hod, the protesters took a few steps back unconsciously. They really didn't think Hod would really get off the car. Fake, he is alone, what is he afraid of? Teach this ignorant guy a lesson. This guy is not a superhero, let's do it. Let's do it together. Several protesters gritted their teeth and raised their signs and smashed them at Hod. Whoosh. However, when the wooden sign flew through the air, a dark light suddenly flashed in their eyes. They suddenly stopped the wooden sign in their hands and smashed it at their companions. Fake, are you blind? Ah, don't hit me. Have you taken too much? Who brought this guy in? Quote. The protesters fought each other like wild beasts, biting and wrestling with each other. Tui. Hodder's pupils flashed a fiery red light, which looked strange and bewitching. He shook his head contemptuously and got in the car and left. The Cayenne slowly drove into the path and stopped at the back door of the base. Hood looked around and saw a woman wearing a baseball cap and a hood carefully walking out from behind a tree. Wanda did not wear her iconic red windbreaker today. The eyes between her hair were filled with melancholy and pain. Hood could tell from her expression that she was not afraid of herself, but of the protesters. Just like the situation just now, the group of crazy guys wanted to tear Wanda apart alive. After making sure that the protesters in the distance were still tearing each other apart, Wanda trotted to the passenger seat of the car. After getting in the car, the nervous look on Wanda's face relaxed a lot, and she breathed a long sigh of relief. She would rather face Hood than those protesters. Whenever she saw the distorted faces of those protesters, she felt mixed emotions. It's okay, they didn't see you. Hodder looked at Wanda and couldn't help but comfort her. Although you are not a good person, I still want to thank you. Because Hood still chose to stand by her side at this moment. Although his words were a bit irritating, he always cared about her. From the beginning to the end, he chose her without hesitation. He was planning to get off the car to help her vent her anger just now, which made her feel a little warmer in her heart. Hood was the only person who cared about her besides the Avengers. Even when she was drunk, he still wanted to help her first. Even if she was scolded outside, she was not shaken at all. Oh, Hood's mouth corners slightly raised, and he asked with a sly smile, am I not a good person? Stop pretending, you came to me just for that matter. Wanda pursed her lips and glanced at Hood unhappily. The man was thinking about these things. Besides this matter, how could Hood have anything else to ask her? Little witch, you are too dirty. Who is like you? Have you ever heard of a saying, how you see others is how others see you? Hodder reached out and rubbed Wanda's little head vigorously and then said, I have something serious to talk to you about. What's the matter? Wanda turned her head and looked at Horde with a puzzled look. I asked you to come out to teach you how to master chaos magic. Hod did not hide anything and directly stated the purpose of his trip. Chaos magic. Wanda's eyes were filled with doubt. It was the first time she heard this word. That's your ability. Hod suddenly remembered that Wanda didn't know what the energy in her body was called. Chaos magic. My ability. Wanda was surprised and asked blankly, can you teach me how to control my ability? She has been trying to control this ability, but she has no way to do it. Not sure yet. Hood smiled evilly and glanced at Wanda, who was dressed tightly, but you seem to want to do something else just now. Wanda's cheeks blushed when she heard this. Wasn't what Hood said just now saying that her mind was not pure? She glanced at Hood's expression carefully. In fact, she didn't hate this man that much, it was just that the progress was a little too fast. Okay. Hod pulled Wanda closer and rubbed her head. I won't tease you anymore, let's go to my place first. After that, he started the car and turned the car towards the manor. He wanted to tell Tony that he could help Wanda stabilize her ability, but it was not appropriate now. After all, he was not sure whether he was really successful, so he could only try it with the idea of giving it a try. In the manor, in a room decorated in a low-key and luxurious style. Wanda sat on the white bed, with her head down, looking restless. She couldn't help but recall what happened last night when she was in the car just now. As her memory became clearer, it became harder for her to forget, and she could even recall every detail. In addition, she was still in Hood's room, which made her heart beat faster. In the silent room, she could even hear her own heartbeat. Hood picked up a stool and sat opposite Wanda. In every move, Wanda could even smell the scent of Hood's cologne. Wanda, before we start, I want to ask a question first. Hodder sat upright, looking straight into Wanda's blue eyes with a serious expression. You say. Wanda was a little nervous at first, but she was not used to seeing Hood's serious look. What do you think your ability is? Hood paused and asked again, is it a mutant ability? Or is it an energy body, or has it brought some changes to you? Wanda pondered for a moment. I think it's an energy body. Back in the lab, Hydra injected a kind of energy into my body. The energy bodies in the body can be mobilized at will, they will continue to regenerate, and even change my body imperceptibly. But they are difficult to control and can even affect my mood. If she could really control the power in her body at will, she wouldn't feel so powerless. Chaos magic does affect the mind, but it is not a simple energy body, but an ancient form of magic. Hodder explained chaos magic as simply as possible. Wanda cannot control chaos magic. This power itself cannot be completely controlled. If she wants to control it, she can only continuously improve her control during practice to further suppress the risk of losing control. If she doesn't do that, then what awaits Wanda is only a critical point at a certain moment. Or she may be eroded by chaos magic when her emotions are out of control, and even turn black. He remembered that this was reflected in the later Scarlet Witch, who was eroded by chaos magic. Eventually, she turned black and became a villain. You mean there is magic in my body? Wanda frowned and asked in disbelief. Because in her opinion, this is just an energy body and should not have much to do with magic. And magic sounds too magical. Hood did not speak, but nodded with a firm expression, and at the same time stretched out his hands to hold Wanda's hands. The sudden action made Wanda's heart beat faster, and even her body became stiff. What are you going to do? Her face flushed and her heart beat fast, and even her body trembled slightly. What happened yesterday has not yet been resolved. Don't be nervous, relax, and cooperate with me. Hood looked at Wanda with a gentle look. The gentle look made Wanda believe Hood involuntarily. Hood took a deep breath, and fire emerged in his eyes. Buzz. The next moment, fiery red energy material emerged from his palm. After the appearance of this energy material, the chaos magic in Wanda's body was also awakened at this time. Without control, it actually emerged from her palm. Chaos magic and the power of the Phoenix intertwined and blended with each other at this moment. Just like the climbing ivy entwined and climbing each other, a mysterious feeling came to Wanda's heart. Wanda widened her eyes, looking at Hood in front of her in disbelief. Because when the energy in her body was blending with the fire, she had an extremely strong sense of intimacy in her heart. And she didn't know why, at this moment, she actually had a feeling that was hard to describe. This was completely different from family and friendship, as if she could completely trust Hood. Even the vigilant eyes became incomparably gentle at this moment. She looked at Hood's handsome face. It was obviously an oriental face, but with deep eye sockets and a high nose bridge. It looked so angular, and there was even a feeling of heartbeat. Just looking at Hood, her eyes were even a little blurred at this moment. The whole person seemed to have melted into a puddle of water, and even her eyes were a little scattered. Wanda, there's something wrong with your eyes. Hood's voice suddenly pulled Wanda back. I didn't. Wanda's voice suddenly rose, but her panicked expression made her words seem so pale. Okay, idiot, look here. Hood scratched Wanda's high nose bridge and asked her to look at her clenched hands. Due to the mutual familiarity between the Phoenix Force and chaos magic, coupled with Hood's control over magic, he mobilized the chaos magic in Wanda's body just by shaking hands. When the two magical energies blended, they quickly spread outward like a scarlet tide. The scarlet light, like the waves of the aurora, enveloped the entire room. Buzz. The original room actually changed drastically at this time at a speed visible to the naked eye. As if time was constantly going backwards, the surrounding furniture and decorations began to become retro. As the light shone, the changes around became faster and faster. It feels like being in hundreds of years ago. This is not a fantasy, this is reality. Wanda denied it when faced with this scene, and even her voice became slightly trembling. But even she could still clearly feel that everything happening around her was extremely real. The reality was beyond her imagination, and she couldn't even find the slightest flaw. Even when each object changed, it seemed as if it should be like this. And what shocked her even more was that all of this was created by the chaos magic in her body. Wanda took a long time to come back to her senses, and asked with a short breath, "Hodder, how did you do it?" Hodder's mouth corners slightly raised. "This is chaos magic." Chapter 11. Wanda looked around at the ever-changing interior of the room, her eyes full of wonder. Is this the effect of chaos magic? She had never thought that chaos magic could produce such a change. She even couldn't believe that this was the power in her body. All of this is the effect of chaos magic distorting reality. I just used the original power of chaos magic based on my understanding of it. Hod nodded slowly and answered with an affirmative expression. In fact, he did not deliberately control all this. To be precise, he just led Wanda to get familiar with this power. After saying that, he took the initiative to let go of his hand. Buzz. As the scarlet light disappeared, everything in the room began to recover at a speed visible to the naked eye. How do you know so much about it? Wanda was more curious about the mysterious man in front of her. Because Hood knew his power even better than she did. We have already had negative contact, how could I not understand? Hodder raised the corner of his mouth and stretched out his hand to pinch Wanda's little face. Because Wanda was thin, he always thought that there should be no flesh. When he pinched it, he found that it was much softer than he imagined. After pinching it, he couldn't help rubbing it twice. It felt really good to touch, white, soft and tender. Stop playing, stop touching me. Wanda's face was so red from being touched that it seemed like steam was coming out of it. She knew that Hood was teasing her on purpose, but she couldn't help but think of what happened last night. Especially after the energy blending, she found that she was not so resistant to Hood's contact. On the contrary, when she was in contact with Hood, she would feel at ease. Especially after what happened just now, she found that the two seemed to have a lot in common. Okay, hurry up and let me control. Chaos magic. Although I already knew that the energy in my body was magic, it was still a little hard to accept for a while. The studious little witch is destined to become great. Hodder stopped and looked at Wanda with a gentle look. You have to feel its existence and pay attention to its senses. It is not a simple energy, but an ancient magic. To control this energy, it is not only necessary to understand how it works, but also to calm down and comprehend it. It's like a car. If it is pushed by external force, it will be very difficult. But if you sit in the car and step on the accelerator, it will go much faster. Understand it. Wanda suddenly realized. She had just used it as an ordinary energy body or psychic ability. She had never thought of using this method to feel the chaos magic in her body again. If Horde didn't tell her, she would probably never make any progress in her life. But now she knows that the power of chaos magic can even affect reality. Then when they contact each other next time, they will also develop in this direction. Well, my lovely little witch is much more savvy than I thought. Hodder nodded with satisfaction. Let's get started. If you make a mistake, you will be punished. Ah, punishment. Wanda was stunned for a moment, then she reacted suddenly, and her ear tips turned pink. Even if she hadn't been told in detail, she could guess that this punishment would definitely be very humiliating. Turn it into anything else. Hodder casually placed the cup on the table beside him. Let's start. Wanda took a deep breath, and her eyes became solemn. She opened her hands, and a scarlet light suddenly bloomed in her hands. Bang! As a scarlet light flashed, the cup was suddenly concentrated. Snap! A crisp sound rang out, and the cup shattered to the ground in an instant. Broken. Wanda pouted and murmured with a look of disappointment. She didn't expect that she would face failure at the very beginning. It's okay. Hod pinched Wanda's little face and picked up another cup. Feel it carefully. Encouraged by Hod, Wanda's eyes also flashed. She tried again, focusing the chaos magic in her body on the cup. But the next second, the cup shattered again. Seeing this scene, Wanda became visibly disappointed. Don't worry. Hod sat next to Wanda and said softly, chaos magic is not purely constructive or destructive. It can create everything, but it can also destroy everything and turn everything into nothingness. Creation and destruction. Wanda frowned and pondered secretly. These two things sound simple, but they are completely opposite. Horde held Wanda's hand, and energy burst out of his palm, and the two energies merged. But you are more destructive now, and not constructive at all. Chaos magic is like the harmony of yin and yang. What you need to do is to make the two reach a balance point so that they can be transformed and merged freely. As he spoke, the broken cup began to overlap at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then recovered as before. Looking at the scene in front of her, Wanda subconsciously opened her cherry mouth. Although she knew that chaos magic could do it, she didn't expect it to be so simple. You mean a balance point? Wanda bent down and picked up the cup on the ground, and found that it fit perfectly without any cracks. Do you want to try it? Hod took the cup from Wanda and put it on the stool in front of him. Yes, Wanda nodded without hesitation, closing her eyes for a while before opening them again. She opened her hands and carefully recalled the feeling when Horde used chaos magic just now. The bright scarlet light enveloped the mug. Buzz, buzz, buzz. This time, accompanied by the buzzing, the mug did not break. Instead, it kept twisting and changing, and the things around it were constantly twisting. At this moment, the other half changed and turned into a square box. Success. When Wanda saw this scene, she excitedly hugged Hood beside her and cheered. She really didn't expect that she actually succeeded. This means that she can further control her energy. However, in her excitement, Wanda didn't notice that her actions made Hood's expression gradually become subtle. Hood felt what happiness was in the true sense. Until Wanda suddenly found that Hood seemed to be a little bit wrong. When she looked down, her movements instantly became extremely stiff. I helped you a lot, how do you want to thank me? Horde put his hand on her shoulder with a wicked smile, and the two looked at each other. Creaking, 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 the sound of the wind came and went. It rained that night, and the wet rain streaked across the window. And the pear blossoms in the rain on the tree in the house. Ding! Thanks to your teaching, Wanda has learned to master chaos magic. Get reward. The power of the 12 talismans. Ding! You made love with Wanda and made her feel great. Reward. Phoenix Force Fragment. No will. In the morning, the system's voice sounded in his mind, and he opened his eyes dazedly. The bed sheets were already messy, and Wanda was sleeping with rosy skin. Hearing the belated system reward reminder, Horde was delighted. The second Phoenix Fragment. He really didn't expect that his luck would be so good that he got the second Phoenix Fragment so quickly. The next moment, a powerful energy appeared in his body out of thin air. The energy flowed rapidly in the body and spread to the limbs. The already very strong body became even stronger at this moment. The power came from all parts of the body, and the body that was originally a little tired became energetic. The comfort brought by this power made Huoda couldn't help but let out a long breath. He could clearly feel the surging power inside his body like a volcano. Because there was an extra Phoenix Force Fragment, the energy in the body also increased. The superposition of two Phoenix Force Fragments is not just a 1+1 superposition. Instead, it becomes more surging, and even the control over the Phoenix Force will be further improved. This is the real power. Hod couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Although he had received many rewards before, they were not at the same level as the Phoenix Force. When he was a fragment, he might be at the sub-father level, but now he was definitely at the father level of Odin. If he could obtain all the fragments of the Phoenix Force, it would not be an exaggeration to say that he was the strongest existence in the world. Apart from other things, the complete Phoenix Force could even compile cause and effect and change fate. Even as small as life or as large as the universe, it could be decomposed, transformed, reorganized, created and destroyed at will. System. Hod summoned the system in his mind. The system's light screen instantly appeared in front of Hod. On the blue imaginary light screen, the current progress of Phoenix Force collection was clearly written. Phoenix Force Fragments, 2/12. Are we still short of 10 fragments now? Hod frowned and looked at the display above. He had never paid attention to the progress of collecting this fragment. Because according to his original expectation, he should have collected at least 1/3 of it now. It seems that the Phoenix Force is much more terrifying than I imagined. Hod couldn't help but sigh in his heart. His current strength is already very terrifying. Even the father-level Thanos has to fight him to a draw. Wait, the power of the 12 spells. Hod was stunned for a moment, and then he set his sights on the first reward. But when he saw the words, power of the 12 talismans, he couldn't help but be stunned. These were the 12 zodiac talismans in the adventure, and they had been integrated together. He was very familiar with these 12 zodiac talismans, and each of them had extremely terrifying abilities. The eternal youth, immortality, and immortality of the dog talisman alone were already abilities that countless people pursued. Possessing one of the 12 talismans was equivalent to a weakened version of Superman. And he actually obtained all the 12 zodiac talismans. Foxing is indeed a lucky star. The rewards I got these days are much better than before. Hodder couldn't help but sigh secretly, and his mood became extremely happy. Well, next to him, Wanda, who was lying on the white bed, uttered a whimper and stretched, looking very hot. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Hood sitting up next to him, looking at him with a smirk on his face. Wanda. Hood grabbed Wanda's hand. What's wrong? Wanda had already gotten used to Hood, and she asked back while feeling the warmth in Hood's hands. You are really my lucky star. Hodder turned over and pressed on Wanda without saying a word. It's morning. Before Wanda finished speaking, the room suddenly blossomed with spring light. On the table, you really can't stop for even a moment. Wanda, who was weak all over, looked at Hood opposite her with complaints. It had only been a short time, and she couldn't even count it. She boasted that her physical fitness was different from that of ordinary people, but she couldn't stand such a torment. What, you think it's not enough? Hodder turned the remaining sausage with the silver fork in his hand. Roll, if you don't want to eat it, give it to me. Wanda looked at the remaining sausages on Hoard's plate and shouted angrily. Here you go, it seems the little witch really likes sausages. Hodder passed the sausage to Wanda and teased her. Shut up. If you do this again, don't contact me again. After Hood's teaching, Wanda instantly understood what Hood meant, and was immediately embarrassed and angry. The speed of the car has reached 300 kilometers per hour. Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Hood watched Wanda finish eating the sausage and wiped the corners of her mouth with a tissue. Let's go out for a walk together. No, Wanda shook her head without thinking. There was so much hatred towards her outside. If she went out now, those guys would probably chase her like crazy and fight her to the death. She was not worried about her life, she was just worried about whether she would cause a bigger trouble. Don't worry, I'm here. Hood saw why Wanda refused, held Wanda's hand and whispered comfortingly. Feeling the breath beside her, the fear in Wanda's heart was suppressed a lot, and finally nodded slowly, okay. On the way to the city, the maple trees have turned slightly yellow. A light coolness swept through the gaps in the car window. Feeling the breeze, Wanda's mouth corners unconsciously raised. She didn't know how long she hadn't been so relaxed. Maybe this is the sense of security. When Hood is next to her, she feels that she doesn't have to worry about anything. As the car drove into the city, the tall buildings were like a forest of reinforced concrete. The increasing number of pedestrians on the street made Wanda, who was sitting in the passenger seat, feel a little more depressed. She couldn't help but look up at Hood and tried to take a deep breath to reduce her fear. At this moment, a hand held her left hand, and the warmth that emerged made Wanda's heart surge with warmth. At the intersection of the traffic lights, Hood stopped the car. And the big screen outside the building next to it was playing. Looking up, Ghost Spider in a white hooded battlesuit was constantly showing on the big screen. The tight spider battlesuit showed Ghost Spider's figure to the fullest. The black part even made Hood's blood boil. From the above picture, it can be seen that Queens, New York has already regarded Gwen as its own superhero. In this world, there is no Spider-Man at all, but Ghost Spider Gwen. Tisk tisk tisk, this figure is really good. Hood couldn't help but sigh. It must be said that with the background of the Ghost Spider suit, this feeling made him even more excited. Wanda, who was standing by, felt mixed emotions when she heard this. It was as if her feminine talent had been triggered. The next second, she stretched out her little hand and pinched Hood's waist fiercely. I didn't expect the little witch to be jealous. Hodder took a breath and rubbed his waist pretending to be in pain. Girls should pretend that it doesn't hurt when they are going to kill them, and they must pretend that it hurts when they are going to do it gently. As a man who has been in many flowers, Hodder is naturally familiar with this. You really are. Boom. Wanda was so angry that she was about to continue pinching him when a loud noise suddenly came from the front. The two of them looked up and saw a cloud of dust in front of them. The people who were originally sitting in the car couldn't help but get out to check the situation ahead. Ah, monster. Run. What is this? Get out of my way. Get away. Quote, quote. There were screams and cries from the crowd in front. For a moment, the whole street was in chaos, and people on the street were crying and running back. The vehicles in front were reversing and moving backward. The accident happened suddenly, and the drivers behind were not able to react in time, which caused a large number of rear-end collisions in an instant. The vehicles were piled up together, and the sound of horns, cries, and alarms mixed together. What happened? Wanda unbuckled her seat belt immediately, put her right hand on the door buckle, stared at the situation ahead and frowned slightly. This is in the city center. Generally speaking, this kind of incident will never happen. It is very likely that a vicious incident has occurred ahead. If so, then she must help. Otherwise, there will be extremely serious casualties here. It seems like something is coming. Hodder got out of the car and looked ahead with a frown. Something was running towards this side in the rolling dust. When the tall figure was running, the dust around it was flowing rapidly. The next second, the tall figure rushed out of the thick dust. It was clearly a humanoid creature, covered with dense green scales, and with spikes like steel needles from the top of the head to the tail. It was covered with a piece of white rag, which could barely be seen as a torn shirt. Roar! It suddenly pushed aside all the cars in front of it. The clear roar made the fleeing citizens terrified. Drive, Connor. The moment he saw the monster, Hood recognized the origin of the lizard man. Who? What kind of monster is that? Wanda got off the car and stared at the lizard man not far away with a serious expression. The power of chaos emerged around her wrist, and the crimson light was ready to go. Although she was cursed, the sense of justice in her heart would not dissipate. Roar! The lizard man threw the torn car door towards the store nearby. The huge force even made the car door embed into the red brick wall, and the broken stones flew everywhere. I'm going to stop this monster. Wanda's eyes condensed, and she was about to rise directly into the air. But at this moment, Hadla beside her grabbed Wanda's wrist. Don't worry, someone is coming. I saw. A nimble and sharp white figure quickly turned and moved in the air above the tall buildings. Big lizard, this is not your toy. As the light voice sounded, the white figure swung out an arc and fiercely kicked the lizard man to the ground. At the same time, he did a 365-degree backflip and landed gracefully on the open ground. It's Ghost Spider. When Wanda saw this figure, she instantly recognized her identity. The Avengers had investigated this girl before, so they had a deep impression of her. Roar! The lizard man who was kicked over quickly got up, and with his scaly left hand, he pulled up the electric pole beside him. With a roar, he smashed the electric pole towards the ghost spider. When he swung, a huge sound of wind sounded in the air. The ghost spider flipped backwards and evaded the attack swiftly. Your movements are too slow, you are not a qualified lizard. How about this? I'll send you to the prison first to observe the animal world, maybe you can find some interesting inspiration. Over here, over here. Where are you looking? Don't run over there. Facing the attack of the big lizard, Ghost Spider couldn't help but tease while dodging. The endless words made the already angry lizard man even more manic. He threw the electric pole in his hand at Ghost Spider and tore off the door of a Hummer at the same time. Roar! The frantic lizard man blocked the car door in front of him and rushed towards the Ghost Spider like a bulldozer. She talks so much. Wanda, who was watching the battle not far away, couldn't help but complain. It was the first time she saw someone chattering during a battle. And she didn't repeat herself. It seems that every Spider-Man has the attribute of being a chatterbox. Hodder raised the corner of his mouth and said jokingly with a relaxed expression. Among the superheroes, only Spider-Man would behave like this in battle. Bang, bang, bang. At this time, the sound of collisions continued. The lizard man who was chasing the ghost spider was fooled around, and he couldn't catch the agile ghost spider no matter what. It was like a small insect flying around his ear, making it even more irritable. Looking at the ghost spider that was dodging nimbly, the lizard man suddenly noticed two people in the middle of the road not far away. When he saw the two people, a red light flashed in his eyes. This stupid lizard seems to be targeting us. Hodder raised his lips and shrugged with a helpless look. He was just watching the battle, but he was dragged into the battlefield. Roar! Die! The lizard man's green arms were throbbing with veins, and he swung the car door in his hand and strode towards Horde. Get out of the way. Ghost Spider's expression changed drastically when she saw this scene. She didn't know why she hadn't noticed that there were two people standing there. Facing this scene, she could only grit her teeth and stop dodging, jumping right in front of Hod. Looking at the ghost spider that suddenly appeared in front of him, the lizard man's voice sounded extremely excited. He raised the car door in his hand high and smashed it directly at the ghost spider. HMPH. Facing this fierce blow, Gwen could only grit her teeth and raise her hands to block. With a huge force coming, her heels were smashed into the ground several inches. The lizard man looked at the ghost spider's appearance and grinned, and his sharp teeth looked particularly ferocious. All this was in its plan. Before Gwen could react, its tail swung violently. The powerful blow knocked Gwen to the ground. At the same time, the car door in his hand was thrown towards Gwen with great force and strong wind. At this time, Gwen looked at the car door that was getting closer and closer with a pale face, and there was no time to dodge. At this last moment, the fear made her subconsciously close her eyes. Bang! Dust splashed, and a huge roar resounded through the street. But Gwen found that she was actually fine. She squinted and opened her eyes. And a tall figure stood in front of her. This person was wearing a black t-shirt, with one hand in his pocket, and he leisurely caught the powerful car door with one hand. Back off! On the chaotic street, several vehicles on fire made sounds of burning materials bursting from time to time. Pungent black smoke and dust drifted in the air. Apart from these sounds, the almost deserted street was extremely silent. The burly figure raised his mouth and squeezed the car door with an indifferent look. Gwen Stacy, who was lying on the ground, looked at this figure with wide eyes. Who is this person? She has never seen this person before. This person should not be a superhero. But this person can easily block the huge force of the lizard man. How is this possible? The lizard Connor's erect pupils suddenly shrank into needles. The superpower he had worked so hard to obtain seemed so unbearable in front of this strange man. Just now, in order to be able to directly deal with the ghost spider, he had clearly used all his strength. But the man in front of him blocked it with just one hand, and his left hand was in his pocket, looking very relaxed. Hey! Hodder raised the corner of his mouth, and said with a sneer, "You are so weak, why don't you stay in the sewer? Why are you wandering around here?" While he was speaking, a blue light appeared on his wrist. If you look closely, it is clearly a pattern of a bull's head. This is clearly the power of the bull talisman. Possessing the bull talisman will gain the power of strength and super physical strength. The powerful bull magic can make the holder powerful, greatly increase the physical strength of the whole body, and greatly enhance brute force. At the same time, the striking force, impact force, physical attack, destructive power, etc. will be greatly improved. Although it may not be enough to face the strong men of the universe. But facing the enemies on the surface, it can be said that it is already at ease. You, Lizard Connor roared. This kind of humiliation was simply unbearable for him. The huge tail swung violently and hit Gwen on the ground fiercely. Gwen saw this powerful blow and supported his hands on both sides of his head to dodge. In a flash, Hood kicked the lizard with his foot, and when he raised his foot, there was a huge sound of wind. Boom! The lizard man was like a kite with a broken string, and he smashed into the wall of the street next to him. The broken wall collapsed, leaving a huge hole. This power, is this a carbon-based creature? Gwen was stunned. She had just faced the lizard man and felt his terrifying power. He was so powerful that he could tear a car apart. But in front of this young man, he was easily defeated. She even saw a hint of satisfaction in the young man's expression. It was as if he had just killed an ant. Gwen even wondered if she was dreaming. This was not a power of the same level. How long are you going to lie on the ground? Hodder retracted his legs and looked down at Gwen on the ground with a calm expression. Gwen was stunned at first. Oh. Feel sorry. She came to her senses at this moment and found herself still lying on the ground. But just as she was about to jump up, she suddenly felt a surge of hormones. This mysterious man actually knelt on one knee and picked her up. The sudden princess hug made Gwen's brain buzz instantly. Her brain was a little out of order, and her face under the mask became extremely hot. She never thought that this man would do this. This was the first time she was picked up in this way. Well, I'm fine. I can do it myself. After a moment, Gwen stammered and shouted, her body twisting involuntarily. I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional, but every move seemed so ambiguous. Through the thin ghost spider suit, she could even feel the warmth from the man's palm. This made her heart beat faster, and the big eyes on the mask widened slightly. Yeah, Hodder nodded slightly, turned aside with a calm expression and let go of Gwen. Are you okay? Wanda, who was not far away, glared at Hood fiercely before turning her gaze to Gwen. Although Hood was serious now, she felt that Hood was not so kind. I'm fine. Gwen turned her gaze to the woman walking towards her from a distance. When she saw this person, her eyes widened. Are you the Scarlet Witch? I actually met an Avenger. I am your die-hard fan and I have always admired you. Ignore the nonsense those guys out there are talking about, I know that's not the case. And, you were really beautiful. After seeing Wanda, Gwen forgot everything that had just happened. She ran to her idol and chattered excitedly. Thank you. Facing the lively Gwen, Wanda smiled and nodded. By the way, are you also a superhero? Gwen turned her head to look at Hood, frowned and thought for a long time without any impression, but why haven't I seen you before? Because she paid close attention to the news of the Avengers. If she had appeared on TV, she should have some memory. But this young man had never appeared at all. I'm not a superhero. Hodder shook his head indifferently, and subconsciously glanced at Gwen's figure. 85, 56, 90. Tisk tisk tisk. For this age group, this figure is very good. Although Gwen's height and figure are not as good as Wanda's. But Gwen has a completely different aura. If Wanda is melancholy and charming, then Gwen exudes a youthful aura everywhere. Just like an 18-year-old college student. Just as Hodder was admiring the beauty, there was a sudden sound of gravel behind him. There was a noise. The lizard man slowly walked out of the hole, panting and looking at the people. Seeing these three people standing here chatting, he was so angry that his whole body couldn't stop shaking. It was clear that they didn't take him seriously at all. I almost forgot you were still here. Hod retracted his gaze and looked at the lizard man with displeasure. He was reminiscing about the beauty of his youth, and this broken lizard man actually jumped out again and again. This really ruined his mood. Lizard man Connor was furious. He was extremely angry at Horde's contempt and rushed towards Horde like a madman. Bang, bang, bang. When the angry lizard man ran, every step he took would cause the ground to shake slightly. Even the ground where he ran would leave cracks. Hod, be careful. Wanda looked at the fierce scene and couldn't help but warn. This monster looked like he was going to fight to the death. He is very powerful, be careful. Gwen also took a fighting stance, ready to support at any time. Boom. But before he could finish his words, a scorching ray shot out from Horde's eyes. This terrifying light seemed to be able to penetrate everything in the world. With great power, it directly penetrated the chest of the lizard man. At the moment of penetration, green blood splashed out. The lizard man looked down in disbelief, his pupils trembling constantly. A huge blood hole was left in his abdomen. Through the blood hole, you can still see the scene behind. Ho ho ho. Lizard man Connor looked at the huge hole, his eyes dimmed. How is this possible? He staggered back several steps and fell heavily to the ground. Green blood flowed along the cracked ground and seeped into the. You can actually do this. Wanda looked at Hood in disbelief. This made Hood's already mysterious body shrouded in a thick fog. At the same time, it revealed an indescribable charm. She originally thought that Hood was only powerful in strength and magic, but she found that this was just one part of this man. She didn't know Hood at all. He was much more mysterious than she thought. Mountaineer, entrepreneur, new Tony Stark, started from scratch. Understand magic, no chaos magic, and also have ancient energy in his body. She thought this was already the limit, but the laser just now refreshed her cognition. And she could keenly feel the power contained in the light. Are you really not a superhero? Gwen was shocked. She looked at the calm Hood in front of her with admiration. The move you just made was really cool. How did you do that, Ray? She said while gesturing excitedly. The scene just now shocked her. Talent. Hod pulled his hand out of his pocket and rubbed Gwen's excited little head. Want to learn? I can teach you. Ahem, Hood, this can be left to others to deal with. Just then, Wanda on the side interrupted the conversation of the two. She didn't know why, but she felt uncomfortable when she saw the intimate behavior of the two here. Especially the familiar rubbing of the head, she already felt that it was exclusive to her. But now Hood did it to others, which made her feel mixed. But she also knew that the two did not do anything too out of line. Boom! Suddenly, a deafening explosion came from the building not far away. The huge explosion even made the ground tremble slightly. Oh no! Gwen heard the noise and his face turned pale. I forgot about the important thing. What's going on? Wanda looked at the situation in the distance, frowned and asked. The lizard man intends to spread the gas tanks containing mutation ingredients throughout New York, causing everyone to mutate. Gwen said as she took a running start and jumped up, quickly swinging towards the scene of the incident. She knew very well that if there was a problem with the gas tank, no one in New York would be spared. This was also the purpose of the lizard man Connor, which was to turn everyone into reptiles. Let's go too, Hood thought, and flew over there quickly with Wanda. The first floor of the towering building was ablaze with flames, and explosions were heard from time to time. The raging flames rolled and spread all around, with thick smoke rising from inside, and the terrifying heat wave made the air distorted. The black smoke rolled out from the breach and turned the surrounding walls black. At this time, the deep blue sky was shrouded in thick smoke, and the raging fire spread with the heat wave, mixed with strange green smoke. Come and save people. Call the fire department immediately. Someone come save my children, they are still in there. Don't pull me, I want to go in and save my wife. Where is the fire hydrant? Someone help me. Quote. People outside the building were running and screaming. Many of them had come to hide inside because of the riot caused by the lizardmen. But they never expected an explosion to happen. Because of the surging crowd, many people were left inside the building. People outside the building were wailing. Some people rushed into the building, but were forced back by the scorching flames and suffocating black smoke. We have to put out the fire quickly. Otherwise, the flames will sweep across New York with the green mist. Gwen stood on the building, looking around nervously, trying to see if there was a water tank nearby. If they didn't hurry up, even if the people in the building survived, they would be infected by the green mist and turned into reptile monsters. Hodder noticed that Wanda beside him looked dazed, with a mixture of fear, hesitation and Hod, the fire is too big, I can't do it. Wanda's voice trembled, and everything in front of her began to overlap with the memories in her mind. She was not sure if she could really do it. If she didn't do it. During the German mission, her mistake caused the building to explode. The explosion also caused a fire, but she failed to put out the fire. You can do it. Hod held his shoulders and said encouragingly, chaos magic can destroy everything, but it can also create everything. Yes, I can do it. Wanda felt the warmth and trust, and the confidence she had lost in her heart returned. She took a deep breath and slowly walked towards the fire. Her determined back formed a sharp contrast with the frantically fleeing crowd around her. What is she going to do? Gwen wondered. If she remembered correctly, Wanda should not be able to put out the fire. Hod hopes that this incident can help Wanda break through her inner demons. If you don't face your fear head-on, you will always be wrapped in fear. And this is the best time. Who is that person? Why is she walking towards the fire? I remember, this woman seems to be Scarlet Witch. How did she get here? Could it be that she wanted to kill the people inside? God, Chaoying finally comes and saves my child. But what's the point of her coming here? This guy only kills innocent people. Shut up, no one will make a mistake, now we can only put our hope on her. Yes, after all, Scarlet Witch once saved New York. Quote. The gossips around her made Wanda hesitate a little. What if I screw up again? Don't be afraid, there are few celebrities in the world who don't have haters. Look at Tony, he is still alive despite all the rumors, isn't he? Hood made an inappropriate joke standing aside. He knew Wanda's fragile heart very well. She was a sensitive and self-abased poor person. Her parents died when she was young, and she depended on her brother for life, struggling to survive in the gunfire. She finally escaped to the United States and ended her years of revenge, but her brother died. No one could accept this. And it was precisely because of this reason that chaos magic would infinitely magnify the fragile side of her heart. Hodder, you're right. Wanda's eyes became more determined. She looked at Hodder deeply and murmured in a voice that only she could hear, I still have you. Boom. The fire scene that continued to sweep the flames caused another explosion. The people trapped in the building screamed in despair. Wanda took off her hood with a firm look and threw her baseball cap on the ground. At this moment, she plucked up the courage to reveal her true face. The eyes of everyone around were focused on the Scarlet Witch. Boom. She opened her arms and her clothes floated with the airflow. The scarlet light surrounded her like a stream of light. Wanda floated up in the scarlet light. The scarlet light swirls around Wanda like a fairy. The jumping light shines all around, and the red hooded coat looks scarlet at this moment. Under the bright light, the light yellow hair is rendered red. The delicate face is even more beautiful at this moment. What a nice view. Gwen looked at this scene, her eyes widened in admiration. Scarlet Witch at this moment was just like Freya in the myth. Scarlet Witch is really more attractive. Hodder stared at Wanda floating in the air and sighed. It must be said that Wanda is more charming at this time. He finally understood why most people think that witches are more attractive after they turn evil. Wanda opened her arms, and scarlet light spread toward the fire scene like a tide. Under the suppression of the scarlet light, the howling flames were gradually suppressed. Even the surrounding black smoke was compressed into a ball by the power of chaos magic. As the scarlet light compressed inside, Wanda's expression became more solemn. This is a large-scale manipulation of chaos magic, which requires extremely delicate operation. Fine beads of sweat covered her forehead, and Wanda kept moving her hands. When she was in Germany, she had tried to compress the explosion, but that had caused extremely serious consequences. She could even clearly feel the emotions of everyone around her. Their hearts were filled with pain, despair, and fear. The appearance of these scenes caused chaos in the chaos magic she controlled, and even the originally suppressed flames spread outward at this time. Hod frowned slightly as he looked at the painful look on Wanda's face in front of him. He knew very well that it was not difficult to do all this with the power of the Scarlet Witch. The real difficulty now was how Wanda could overcome the obstacles in her heart. This was not something he could help with, and she could only rely on herself to overcome this difficulty. He controlled his body and floated to Wanda's side. Forget the past, now only you can save them, think about what I said before. In fact, this is nothing to you. Believe me, you will never fail. Hod's deep voice sounded in Wanda's ears. Wanda did not look back, but she knew that Hod was standing beside her. She could even clearly smell the familiar cologne on Hod's body under the burning temperature of the flames. Wanda took a deep breath, and her eyes gradually became firm. Yes, that's right. Now she is the only one who can save the people inside, and she is the only one who has the ability to do so. Whether she tries or not, this is her only choice now. Even if she wants to retreat now, it's too late, so she can only try her best. Her thoughts returned to last night, and what Hod said flashed through her mind. Chaos magic is not purely destructive, it can also create and change everything. So I can definitely do it. Create everything. Every time Wanda thought of a detail, the scarlet light became more brilliant. She kept pressing her hands, and the scarlet light flowed more smoothly in her hands. As if this was a matter of course. As the light became more brilliant, Wanda's heart became more determined. The fire that had already begun to spread was compressed at a faster rate. Buzz. With a humming sound, the strange scarlet light suddenly erupted like a tide. The fluctuating scarlet light surged towards the entire block. Just like a wave, the entire block was shrouded in red light. Even the color of the sky turned scarlet at this time. Looking from below, it was like a red ocean. What is this? Is this Scarlet Witch's power? This is so beautiful, can even the world change for it? I didn't expect that superheroes possess such powerful strength. Is she going to destroy the whole block like last time? No one knew who said this, but the originally dazed crowd suddenly became extremely panicked. Under the media propaganda, Scarlet Witch has become the synonym of destruction. Seeing this weird scene, fear began to spread among the crowd like a plague. This unknown power made everyone extremely frightened. They wanted to move their steps, but their legs kept shaking. But at this moment, someone suddenly noticed that the fire on the first floor was extinguishing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Surrounded by the scarlet light, frost even began to form. The frost began to spread along the ground and along the wall. As the temperature dropped, the flames disappeared. Scarlet Witch put out the fire. This is incredible, I didn't expect that she really came to save us. Woo woo woo, that's great, my daughter is saved. Who just said he wanted to kill us? Quote. The people opened their eyes wide when they saw this scene. They didn't expect that the Scarlet Witch, who they thought was the end of the world, would actually put out the fire. If it continued like this, the fire would soon be put out by the Scarlet Witch. The green mist turned into ice mist and dissipated. Gwen slowly landed on the ground and sighed at the scene in front of her. She didn't expect Wanda's power to be so strong. You know, this is a building of several thousand square meters. All the flames were suppressed by Wanda alone. Even now, the fire has shown signs of dissipating. It seems that she has finally overcome the obstacle in her heart. Hodder returned to the ground, took out a cigarette and held it in his mouth, muttering with satisfaction. As long as the psychological barrier is broken, Wanda will soon be able to walk out of the shadows. And after this incident, Wanda's power to control chaos magic will inevitably become stronger. He looked at the hardworking little witch, lowered his head slightly, lit a cigarette, and exhaled turbid smoke with a raised corner of his mouth. After a while, the burning fire was finally extinguished. After Wanda did all this, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. As soon as she landed, deafening cheers rang out around her. Long live Scarlet Witch! Success! Scarlet Witch saved us! Scarlet Witch is here to help us! I will never question Scarlet Witch again! Quote. Everyone couldn't help but cheer at this moment. At this moment, Scarlet Witch overturned the stereotypes that the media had brought to them. They all gathered together and surrounded Wanda. Scarlet Witch looked at the excited crowd around her and couldn't help but wipe away the tears flashing in the corners of her eyes with the back of her hand. She didn't know how long it had been since she saw others cheering for her. And the people around her were thanking her now. She knew very well that the reason she could do this was because Hood stood firmly by her side. At the Avengers base, the atmosphere in the office was quiet and dull. Tony sat in a chair with a sad look on his face, chewing dried blueberries, and occasionally glanced at Steve on the sofa opposite. The two were silent, only the sound of Tony eating dried blueberries could be heard. With the recent fermentation of the German incident, the official pressure was increasing. The solution proposed by Hood was very good, but the current situation made it impossible to start. The public relations image and reputation of the Avengers and Wanda could not be changed unless there was a good opportunity. Are you going to sit there forever? Tony slapped the dried blueberries on the table and looked at Steve, who was playing with his phone in silence. What else can be done? The only thing that can change everything is to make Ross change his words. Steve looked at Tony with a cold face. Ross's idea now is to control the Avengers, and these public opinions are definitely Ross's instructions. Otherwise, it would be absolutely impossible to expand the influence to this extent just by relying on these media. It's better to go talk to Wanda about this than to sit here. Tony walked up to Steve, suppressed his anger and said, "Don't forget, it was you who organized the mission in Germany. It was my fault for organizing it, but didn't you do anything wrong?" Steve Rogers glared at Tony Stark with gritted teeth. He admitted that the last incident was an accident, but it was not his intention. Moreover, he didn't think it would be so serious. I'm always trying to clean up your mess. Do you know how many media outlets I have contacted? I have been trying to find a solution. Tony clenched his fists and roared in a low voice. And what about the so-called Captain America? He just holds on to his illusory ideals and sits here motionless. If he says he is not angry, it would be a lie. If he has so much time, he could even go and persuade Wanda. Haha, you were not like this when you were in Sokovia before. Steve clenched his fists, breathing became rapid. Countless people died because of this. No. It was because of you that they died. You thought it was me. Just as Tony was about to retort, he heard the sound of the office door behind him being pushed open. He turned around and saw Black Widow Natasha standing at the door in a daze. It seems that I am here at the wrong time. Natasha shrugged her shoulders and said in a teasing tone, making the atmosphere in the office less solemn. What's up? Tony picked up the dried blueberries and started chewing them. I think you should watch this. Natasha turned on the TV. What she saw was Wanda putting out the fire. A large number of people surrounded Wanda and cheered and shouted. At 13:41 this afternoon, Avengers member Scarlet Witch and the city center stopped the spread of a fire. The reporter's voice came from inside. Tony saw this scene, and his gloomy expression eased a lot at this time. Wanda awakened a new ability. If he remembered correctly, although Wanda could indeed suppress fire, she could not turn fire into frost. Now this was the only possible explanation for everything they saw. I didn't expect that we didn't even notice it, Steve Rogers said with a surprised expression. They were basically all in the Avengers base, and logically they should have known about the awakening of new abilities. But this one awakened the ability without making any noise, and even used this ability to save so many people. This should be because she just woke up, because Wanda's expression is still a little reluctant. Natasha swung the remote control in her hand and continued with a thoughtful look, but now the more important thing is that this incident has gradually changed the media's report on Wanda. After all, with so many people witnessing it, the media certainly cannot change this report at will. This is a good opportunity for them. As long as they handle it well, they may be able to recover the impact of the previous German incident. Don't worry, I will ask the media to work hard to change everyone's impression as much as possible. Two tapped the earphones with his fingers. Call Pepper. After the call was connected, he got straight to the point. Pepper, help me arrange some PR, and then pick up Wanda. After so many years in the business world, he was already familiar with these operations. The most important thing now was to strike while the iron was hot and take this opportunity to find a way to restore his reputation in one fell swoop. But Wanda seems to be in a good mood. Natasha Romanoff couldn't help but sigh as she watched Wanda's smile on the screen. She hadn't seen Wanda smile for a long time. How come Wanda suddenly came to her senses? Steve Rogers sat back on the sofa, looking at the screen with a puzzled look on his face. She was still gloomy a few days ago. But now she is like a different person, and even her abilities have become more powerful. Maybe, she finally figured it out. Natasha Romanoff was also infected by Wanda's smile and said with a smile. Things seem to be getting better at this time. Tony smiled and said, we will know when she comes back. At this time, in Queens, New York. Ding, you helped Wanda escape her demons and restored her reputation. Get reward. Kabuto insect meter Kabuto. Hod leaned against the wall not far away, watching Wanda being interviewed, and suddenly a reminder sounded in his mind. Kabuto insect meter. Use this insect meter to transform into a Kabuto, which requires the approval of the insect meter. Kabuto insect meter. Wanda is really full of treasures. Any reward is top-notch. Hod couldn't help but be happy. He didn't expect that he could get a reward. Kabuto insect instrument is the transformation device of Kamen Rider Kabuto. Yes, it is the narcissist who follows the way of heaven and controls everything. However, few people will refuse his transformation device. Hod dreamed of owning a knight's belt when he was a teenager. Mr. Hodder, since it's all over, I'll leave first. I hope we can have a chance to work together again in the future. Please say goodbye to Wanda for me. Gwen took the initiative to speak up when she saw more and more media. She didn't like those annoying media to ask her questions later. Goodbye. Huoda waved his hand and watched the girl's back disappear among the tall buildings. He thought to himself, it seems that I can only get to know her better in the future. At this time, a row of black luxury cars drove over in the distance. I should go back too. Hodder saw the Stark Group's special car appear and prepared to leave. He knew Tony would definitely make good use of this opportunity to save the reputation of the Avengers and crush Ross's plan for the Avengers. Before leaving, he did not forget to use his mind power to pass on the message. Hod, see you when you have time, enjoy today's glory. Wanda, thank you for today. Far away in northern Europe. In the night, in the eerie forest, a dark atmosphere surrounded them. Wow wow wow. Black crows flew around in the sky and slowly landed on an old house. Ho ho ho. That breath. In front of the old-fashioned TV, a middle-aged woman in a black robe was very excited. The TV was playing a gloomy picture, and the picture on it was the scene of Wanda putting out the fire. Oh Allah, the great Sithan, chaos magic has finally appeared. The woman grabbed both sides of the TV. In the dark room, her blue eyes reflected the images on the screen, and her eyes were full of greed. If Hood was here, he would definitely recognize her at a glance. The woman was Agatha Harkness. New York, chaos magic, here I come. Agatha Harkness opened her arms, her black robe fluttering in the wind. Countless black mists quickly spread from under her black robes, instantly engulfing her whole body. The next moment, there was no trace of Agatha Harkness in this old house. Avengers base. Today is definitely the most fulfilling day for Wanda. She was exhausted from all the interviews, but she enjoyed it. She wanted to go back to rest when she returned to the base, but she saw all the Avengers waiting in the living room. What happened? Wanda looked at everyone in surprise. Why haven't you all gone to bed yet so late? Although this is the Avengers base, there is very little time for everyone to gather together. Seeing so many people sitting here now, she wondered if something big had happened again. Congratulations, the public's support for you has skyrocketed today. It won't be long before you can completely change the previous situation. Tony was the first to raise his glass with a smile. Today's public relations can be said to be very successful. The internet has gradually begun to change their views on them. In the current situation, they will soon be able to get rid of the predicament in front of them. After you did that, those annoying guys outside finally stopped shouting that they wanted to attack us. Falcon Sam shrugged and said jokingly, "Those guys hold signs outside every day. Although the Avengers base is well soundproofed, it's still a headache to watch. No one can stand seeing a group of lunatics shouting downstairs of their house every day. I didn't expect you to do such a big thing without making any noise. This is really beyond our expectations." Natasha slumped her legs on the table. It must be said that Wanda did bring them an unexpected surprise today. "You did a good job, but what exactly is your new ability?" Steve was curious. Everyone was curious when they heard this. The flame was filled with green mist that could cause mutations. If it was just compressed, there would be no way to get rid of the green mist. But Wanda actually used an ability that no one had ever seen before. "I didn't awaken any new abilities, in fact, I just used my previous powers." Wanda walked to Natasha's side and sat down, picking up a pillow. "It's just that I learned how to master it better." They were all companions, so she didn't intend to hide it, so she just said it out loud. Not a new ability. Tony was shocked. He had never thought that Wanda's ability would have other changes. And from Wanda's mouth, he could also know that Wanda had this ability originally, but she just discovered it today. "Isn't your ability given by the Mind Stone?" Dr. Banner wondered. Wanda hugged the pillow and shook her head slightly with a blank look on her face. "I don't know either. He didn't tell me clearly." When Wanda said the word, he, Tony Stark quickly caught the key point. Who is this he? It was obviously someone no one knew. He might be the key to Wanda's ability. Wanda realized at this moment that she had let the cat out of the bag. She couldn't possibly tell anyone about Hood and herself right now. But she couldn't think of a suitable excuse. But if she really told them, how should I explain my relationship with him? If you are hiding something from us, a small mistake could ruin everything. Tony did not stop asking questions, but pressed on with a serious expression. This unknown person might interfere with their plans. Wanda hugged the pillow tightly, almost burying her face in it. She gritted her teeth, her face full of hesitation. Because she really didn't want to tell what happened. "Wanda, why don't you go and rest first?" At this time, Steve took the initiative to speak up to help Wanda out. "Yes, you have been busy all day, you must be very tired." Natasha also took the initiative to speak. As a woman, she had already vaguely sensed something. Only these rough guys could not see Wanda's shy look. And this person must be very important to Wanda, otherwise with Wanda's character, she would definitely not hide it from everyone. When Wanda heard this, she was relieved and quickly threw down the pillow and left in a hurry. Tony frowned as he watched Wanda leave. "Tony, she has the right to make her own choice, and everyone has their own secrets." Steve stopped Tony and said seriously, "And some things may be better left unseen. But this concerns all of us," Tony said solemnly. If you want to worry about this, you might as well think about how to convince Ross. Steve's face was stern. If they really joined the Avengers would become tools. Tony heard this and said coldly, then you decide. After that, he turned around and left. In the office, Tony Stark sat on the leather chair and called Pepper directly. Go and help me find out who has been in contact with Wanda recently. If he doesn't find out, he will never feel at ease. Call. After doing all this, Tony Stark looked exhausted. He had been feeling a lot of pressure these days, and he didn't even know how to vent it. How about going to find Hood? This idea just popped up in his mind and was immediately dismissed. Because Hood is always busy with things. After hesitating for a long time, Tony Stark came to the balcony, put on his battle suit and flew out directly. He was ready to take a good ride to relax. Inside the manor. Imelda, go and tell everyone that today is a day off. Hodder came to the hall and asked the maid to tell everyone to rest. The reason why he asked the maid to rest was because he planned to try out the armored insect instrument. After Imelda bowed and thanked him, she immediately notified all the maids to leave. Is this the Kabuto insect analyzer? Hodder flipped his hand and took out the Kabuto insect analyzer from the system. A transformation device made of steel and shaped like a rhinoceros beetle appeared in his hand. Kabuto insect instrument. To use this insect instrument, you need to get the approval of the insect instrument to transform into a Kabuto. Buzz. Just as he was carefully looking at the Kabuto insect instrument in his hand, the rhinoceros beetle in his hand suddenly made a loud bang. In just a moment, the rhinoceros beetle broke free and flew out. Want to escape? Hod opened his hand and pulled hard. The power of the phoenix wrapped the rhinoceros beetle back into his hand. At the same time, he held it tightly and firmly controlled the rhinoceros beetle in his hand. He used his power to subdue Kabuto insect instrument. Transform. Kabuto. Hod swung the Kabuto insect detector in his hand. Golden light burst out from the Kabuto insect detector, and green light like a nano barrier spread rapidly on Hod's body. When the light enveloped his whole body, a white light flashed. Kabuto's battle suit appeared on Hod's body. A mysterious force flowed around Hod's body. Is this Giotto? In front of the mirror, Hod looked up and down. He was transformed directly into a knight with a long horn like a rhinoceros beetle on his head. It fits the temperament of the king. Compared with Tony's iron suit, each has its own merits. I have to go out for a walk. Hod looked at the silver white armor and couldn't suppress his impulse. It was still late at night, so it was a good time to go out for a walk without attracting too many people's attention. Thinking of this, Hod came to the garage. There were all kinds of vehicles in the garage. There were flying Fords, unicycles, flying Mercedes-Benzes, and jet motorcycles. Many of these vehicles were rewarded by the system, and he simply threw them in the garage. Hod came to a dark black motorcycle. This motorcycle looks similar to the Harley Fat Boy in appearance, but the position of the exhaust pipe has changed a lot. The display screen in front of the car is completely different from the previous ones. It is even a projected 3D display screen. This is also a vehicle rewarded by the system. Amphibious motorcycle. Land, air, water, three-purpose amphibious motorcycle. Hod took a step back and sat on the motorcycle. He just twisted the throttle slightly. The amphibious motorcycle instantly burst into a roar, and with a catapult, it drove directly out of the garage. Cool. Hod felt the baptism of the strong wind and pressed a button on the accelerator handle. Two jet tubes popped out on both sides of the front and rear wheels of the motorcycle. With a twist of the accelerator, the jet tubes burst into blue flames. On the road, a beam of light quickly shuttled across it. The extremely fast nerve reflex allowed Hod to handle it with ease even at a speed of 500 km per hour. Go to Hell's Kitchen. After hesitating for a moment, Hood decided to go to Hell's Kitchen. Maybe he could see Gwen there. On the dark streets of Hell's Kitchen in New York, Hodder slowed down his motorcycle. When he entered the neighborhood, he immediately attracted a lot of onlookers. Hi, man, your cuz is very handsome. A black man with dreadlocks waved at Hod, and there was something bulging around his waist. New York is a city that never sleeps, and Hell's Kitchen is completely different from New York. The streets are dark and messy, and all kinds of graffiti are sprayed everywhere on the walls. Runes and patterns from different cultures, vector graphics seem to be accusing this complex city of chaos. Just like the mixed blood flowing in the blood of the people in this area. And on the dirty streets, you can see people lying on the ground from time to time, and it is not known whether they are wrapped in alcohol or death. Here, chaos, crime, blood, and death can be seen everywhere. Hey, boy, your car is pretty cool, now leave it behind and get out. This is Mr. Jin Bing's territory. The man with the dreadlocks raised his right hand and waved it in the air twice, and the others followed him and surrounded him. The people around him patted the gun handles on their waists while talking. Kingpin. Hod was stunned when he heard this. He didn't expect that there was a Kingpin in this universe. Anyone who has read Marvel has heard of Kingpin. He is the emperor of the underworld, who has absolute control over the East Coast. He is extremely meticulous and his wisdom is far beyond that of ordinary people. More than 90% of his body is muscle. Some people say that he can even punch through a wall with his bare hands. I don't know if getting rid of Jin Bing will bring any benefits. Hodder muttered to himself as he sat on the seat of the motorcycle. His system reward mechanism seems to be a special event. Boy, why don't you leave? Don't think you won't get beaten just because you're wearing strange clothes. The man with dreadlocks curled his lips unkindly. If the man in front of him doesn't know how to respect him, then don't blame him for being rude. Hey, why do this? Hod shook his head, put down the support of the motorcycle and suddenly attacked. With just a swing of his leg, he swept the person next to him and sent him flying backwards. You want to die. The sudden attack made the dreadlock man pull out the revolver from his waist. But before he could pull the trigger, a big hand wrapped in steel suddenly grabbed his revolver. With a loud bang, the revolver and the dreadlock man's left hand were crushed into a ball. Ah! The screams suddenly. It echoed in this crime-ridden street. At this moment, other people took advantage of this opportunity, pulled out their knives and were ready to launch a sneak attack. But in front of Hood, it was like a child playing house. After just a few twists and turns, these hooligans fell to the ground and kept wailing. At this time, in the sky, a steel-red shadow passed by. It was Tony who just came out to relax. He noticed below. Jarvis, zoom in. Looking down, it was a guy in red and silver who was entangled with the hooligans. Tony was stunned, and murmured with a helpless smile, I didn't expect to run into fans when I go out. Tony just smiled and shook his head, then turned around and flew somewhere else. From high in the sky, it was obvious that the guy in red and silver clothes could easily deal with those fools. He didn't bother to care about this kind of shit. Tell me, where is that Kingpin? Hod grabbed the thug with tears on his face, grabbed his collar and pressed him against the window of a nearby car. His entire face was pressed against the car window, and the brute force made the man whimper. I don't know what you're talking about. Let go. It hurts. The gangster gritted his teeth and groaned at Hod. Although he knew the whereabouts of Jin Bing, he would be dead if he told it. Jin Bing was the emperor of the underworld. He knew what was important just by thinking about it. Hey, can't you just tell the truth? Hod sighed helplessly, his eyes suddenly fierce. He suddenly picked up the man and slammed him heavily on the hood. Shish. The gangster curled up like a shrimp in pain, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. Just this one time, the gangster felt as if his internal organs were shattered. Ho ho ho. He was breathing rapidly, and his face was covered with bloodshot from the pain. You are still being stubborn. It's okay. I have time. Hod looked at the man in front of him calmly, without any emotion in his heart. He had no sympathy for this kind of gangster, especially since he had done many things to harm others. Because it can be seen from the tattoo on his face, there are 3 people who died in his hands. Before the gangster could speak, Hod grabbed the gangster's hand and squeezed it hard. Crack. Ah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you. The gangster was going crazy. He couldn't understand how such a terrifying person could appear here. Moreover, his methods were much more cruel than he had imagined. He really felt that he would die if he didn't tell them. Why didn't you say it earlier? Hodder asked impatiently. This is totally wasting his time. Mr. Jin Bing is in an abandoned FBA warehouse in the suburbs. He has an important transaction there today. The gangster wailed and told all the news he knew. Very good, you cooperate with me very well. Hod raised his mouth, raised his hand suddenly and hit the gangster's chin hard. The gangster rolled his eyes and fainted cleanly. In fact, it was not that difficult for him to get information from the gangster. After all, he had the power of the Phoenix and could completely persuade the other party to tell him what he knew. He just wanted to test Jato's ability, so he simply interrogated him in this way. How long are you going to stay there? Hodder moved his shoulders and turned around nonchalantly, facing the 5-story building in front of him. Bang! The white figure suddenly jumped, flipped in the air, and landed lightly on the ground. How did you find me? Gwen looked at the mysterious man in front of her in surprise. Although she had just arrived, her movements were very light and she should not be discovered. Besides, her ability to hide was very strong, but this man determined her position without even looking at her. Maybe I am more sensitive to sound, Miss Spider. Hodder chuckled and looked at Gwen carefully. By the way, Miss Spider, what are you spying on? What do you mean by peeping? I'm trying to gather intelligence. Gwen awkwardly kicked away the gravel at her feet with her right foot and asked, Hey, unicorn, if you go to find Kingpin, can I join you? Why do you call me a unicorn? Hodder was surprised. Don't you have a big horn? Gwen pointed at the big horn. I am a rhinoceros beetle. Hodder leaned against the car and asked lazily, Aren't you afraid that I am a bad guy? The little girl was really bold. She was willing to cooperate with him after just a brief meeting. Anyone who is Kingpin's enemy is a friend. Gwen answered without hesitation, with a firm voice. Do you have a grudge against Kingpin? Hodder really didn't expect that the little spider in this world would have a grudge against Kingpin. So are you going or not? Gwen seemed to be hesitant to speak, but in the end she didn't give a reason. Okay. Hodder didn't ask any more questions. He could hear the sadness in Gwen's tone just now. And he estimated that even if he didn't go, Gwen would definitely go. In a head-on battle, Gwen would most likely not be Kingpin's opponent. If he remembered correctly, Kingpin's strength in a head-on confrontation could suppress Spider-Man. He came to the side of the motorcycle, turned around and sat directly on the motorcycle. Little Spider, come on up. Hodder waved to Gwen who was not far away. No, Gwen shook her head and was about to refuse when she heard Hood say, They are all low-rise buildings. Are you sure you can keep up with me? Hearing this, Gwen looked around Hell's Kitchen. Indeed, in Hell's Kitchen, it was basically wishful thinking to use spider silk to swing across. After much hesitation, he still got on Hod's motorcycle. In the suburbs, outside an abandoned factory surrounded by trees. The huge factory was emitting a faint yellow light. From the outside, it looked like a lumber mill. Despite the lack of light, many figures were still seen patrolling around the factory. Each of them was armed with a gun. Shish. Hod stopped the motorcycle far away and made a shushing gesture to Gwen. Then he slid his right hand across the motorcycle, and a green snake-shaped pattern appeared on the back of his hand. The motorcycle disappeared instantly. Where's the motorcycle? Wasn't it here just now? Gwen's eyes almost popped out when she saw this scene. The motorcycle was clearly in front of her just now. And the most important thing is that she didn't even feel any fluctuations. Who is this guy? Why, are you curious? Hodder turned his head to look at Gwen and asked. Of course. Gwen nodded seriously. If he had this ability, his combat power would definitely increase by more than one level. If you want to learn, I will teach you later. Huoda wanted to rub this cute little head, but finally resisted the urge. Teach me later. Although Hood was wearing a hood and his voice was different from his usual voice. Gwen always felt that this sentence sounded so familiar. Where have I heard this before? Don't stand there, follow me. Hood interrupted Gwen's thoughts. Gwen nodded subconsciously and followed Hood's footsteps quietly. Shish, Kingpin brought his elite troops here too. He specially trained these people to clear obstacles for himself. The two of them hid behind the old and rusty container, and Gwen carefully winked at the distance. As Gwen looked, soldiers armed to the teeth, even comparable to the special forces, appeared in Hod's sight. They were not only equipped with the most advanced bulletproof helmets and vests, but also wore bulletproof masks on their faces. Jin Bing is really rich. Hod couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This set of equipment is at least 500,000 or 600,000. But it actually equipped almost dozens of people. We have to be careful, they are not the same thugs as before. Gwen moved her hands and feet while carefully observing how to find the flaws. She was indeed very skilled, but that didn't mean she was invulnerable. They have undergone special training, so they must be more careful. But just as Gwen was talking, the figure beside him suddenly stood up. Hod actually walked out of the hiding place of the container and strode towards the distance. Hey, Gwen lowered her voice and whispered, "Unicorn, what are you doing?" She didn't know if this guy couldn't hear her because he was wearing armor. Going out like this would obviously be a way to die. I'm going to test the performance of this combat uniform. Hod didn't even look back, moving his hands and feet as he walked. Although he had just dealt with the thugs, there was no useful information at all. If he wanted to know the real strength of Jado, he still had to play with these guys. When Hod walked out, he was noticed by the elite soldiers in the distance. Call, there are foreign invaders. When they noticed that Hood was walking over, they did not shoot immediately, but reported the situation vigilantly. As the news spread, teams from other directions immediately dispatched people to rush over here. In just over 10 seconds, Hood was surrounded. Facing these soldiers, Hood slowly put his hand on the Kabuto insect instrument on his belt. Masked form, he suddenly pulled the lever of the beetle head to the right. Put on clothes. The night form of the rhinoceros beetle has changed at this moment. Hod crossed his hands, and as the light on the surface of the outer armor flashed, pieces of steel armor covered the surface of the armor. The single horn on his head was also retracted at this moment, turning into two forked steel horns. The light appearance has become like a shield at this moment, and it feels indestructible just by looking at it. The reason why Hod changed into this form is entirely because the defense of this mask form is very strong. Even if a missile hits him head-on, it cannot penetrate. This looks so cool. Gwen carefully poked her head out from behind the container, exclaiming with wide eyes. No science and engineering student could refuse such a suit. And she couldn't even see how it was done. Fire. The elite soldier pulled the trigger without hesitation. Fire shot up into the sky. Bullets rained down from the muzzle like raindrops. The bullets covered Hood's head like raindrops. Bang, bang, bang. Because of the training, their shooting was divided into alternating shooting. The rapid sound of gunfire echoed in the sky, without stopping for a moment, as if dense firecrackers were lit. The bullets hit Hood's masked form armor, and the body burst into broken fragments caused by metal collision. The burst of fire bloomed on the surface of the armor, just like fireworks bursting in the night sky. The sound of steel clashing kept echoing around, and the soldiers did not stop pulling the trigger before they saw Hood fall. Hood, on the other hand, observed the changes in the armor's masked form with a calm expression in the hail of bullets. It can be said that the bullets hitting the body are not even a tickle, because of the extremely heavy armor. In his opinion, these people are just struggling to death. This guy can actually handle these guys. Gwen finally let go of his worries. Hodder stood there like a fortress that would never collapse. He was obviously overthinking. In this case, these guys had no effect on Hodder at all. It's my turn to perform. Gwen jumped out of the container nimbly, rolled over, and quickly shot spider silk at the elite soldiers around her with both hands. The sticky spider silk stuck to the soldiers' masks, blocking their vision. Just as they hurriedly tried to tear the spider silk off the masks, they were greeted by a white figure. The white arc rolled and jumped quickly between the trees and obstacles, and the naked eye could only see the white figure in front. Gwen shuttled quickly, and with Hood's cover, she drew an arc in the air. Landing behind the enemy, with wolves in front and tigers behind, the elite soldiers could not take care of themselves at all. Inside the factory, leave the north coast to me. If we join forces, our business will surely spread overseas soon. The fat bald man sat on the black sofa, and his suit was propped up high. He supported his cane with his right hand and raised the wine glass in his left hand with a ferocious smile. Da. Just as Jin Bing was about to toast with the guests, there was a burst of gunfire outside. He frowned and turned to look at his men standing beside him. Boss, there are 2 intruders outside. The subordinate quickly took out the tablet and brought up the surveillance footage. Ghost Spider. Kingpin recognized the identity of the white figure at a glance. Who is this red steel figure? Iron Man. Boss, this shouldn't be Iron Man. The subordinate bent down and explained respectfully. No, let the doctor start plan A and kill them. King Bing finally let go of his worries and waved his hand in disdain. After all, if Iron Man showed up, maybe the Avengers would come. But there was no need to take these two small fish seriously. Mr. Jin Bing, is everything okay outside? The guest sitting opposite him was obviously a little restless. Don't worry, it's just a small trouble and it will be solved soon. Jin Bing grinned and picked up the red wine glass again. Outside, bang, bang, bang. Hod stood calmly in the center of the battlefield, calling out names one by one with his pistol. A simple sweep of the gun. All the guards fell one after another, and the blood from their heads soaked the ground. Are you a scientist? Gwen spun in the air and landed next to Hood. She was very curious about Hood's identity. She often attended various scientific research conferences, but she had no impression of this kind of scientific research results. At first, she thought it was an imitation of Iron Man, but this was clearly not the same type of armor. Hurry up and go in. Hod did not answer Gwen's question, and walked towards the factory. What is your armor made of? It must not be ordinary metal, right? Otherwise it would have been broken just now. Could this be vibranium? Gwen followed closely behind, and kept asking questions. She really couldn't figure out who this person was. Boom! Suddenly, the door of the factory building exploded. In the billowing smoke, more than 20 strange shadows appeared faintly. Looking closely, they were clearly more than 20 robots with mecha appearance and spider legs on their backs. These robots climbed along the wall quickly, and as their mouths opened, they could even see the machine guns installed in their mouths. It's Kingpin's spider killer. Gwen looked very ugly when she saw this scene. These robots were specially researched for her. It's just that she had solved those before, but she didn't expect that they would be mass-produced. It seems that Jin Bing really likes you. The cost of this thing should not be low. Hod didn't care about these spider robots at all, but looked at the little spider beside him with a teasing look. Don't be distracted. These guys are not easy to deal with. Gwen lowered her body. Her expression under the mask was solemn, and her big eyes on the mask were wrinkled. She had fought with these things before, and they were superior in terms of agility and power. Even in complex terrain, their reaction was comparable to hers. Boom! The next moment, missiles with tail flames were fired from the bottom of the spider robot. These more than 20 missiles were like fireworks rising into the sky, and they arrived in front of the two in a flash. Get out of the way. Gwen suddenly jumped aside. She never thought that this was not only mass-produced, but also equipped with missiles. Facing the flying missiles, Hood casually grabbed a missile flying towards his face. The other missiles exploded directly on Hood's body like a storm. Boom! With continuous loud noises, Hood's position was covered by continuous flames. The surrounding ground was lifted up by the powerful missiles, and the loose soil flew around. Looking from the sky, it was like a mushroom cloud rising. The terrifying power even made the surrounding land appear charred. Even the surrounding debris was directly blown away by the terrifying power. Quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark. Unicorn. Gwen's pupils trembled violently. Her comrade who had just fought side by side with her was killed by a missile attack. She was almost suffocating. She never expected it to turn out like this. Ignorance. Kingpin in the factory looked at the screen on the tablet and drank the wine in the glass. Facing such a concentrated missile, even those so-called superheroes would not be able to stop it. The missiles installed here are all the top-notch military missiles sold by Stark Group before. However, as the smoke slowly dissipated, a burly figure bathed in the remaining smoke stood there motionless. The surrounding land turned into scorched earth, and there was not even a trace of damage on the surface of the mecha. This armor is quite hard. Hod stretched his body and felt no pain, not even itchy. He was a little worried that the armor would not be able to withstand it. Unexpectedly, even more than 20 missiles only made him tremble slightly. How is this possible? Jin Bing subconsciously let go of the wine glass, and the deep red wine spilled on his shirt. But he ignored it and looked at the picture above with a ferocious expression. Mr. Jin Bing, I'll leave first. The guest sitting opposite was hesitant and ready to leave. He was just here to do business and had no intention of risking his life here. Don't worry, there will be no problem. Jin Bing spoke in a hurried tone to win back the client, and at the same time turned his head to look at his men and shouted, "Kill him! Kill him for me!" He has faced so many enemies, but this is the first time he feels so ashamed. His client is obviously right in front of him, but he can't even deal with a small person of unknown origin. As Jin Bing's order was given, more than 20 spider robots immediately divided into 2 teams and rushed towards Hood and Gwen. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The moment the spider robots surrounded them, the spider legs behind them were like sharp spears, driving the sound of breaking through the air and attacking the 2. With the blessing of the engine, these spider legs contain great power, and the power of each time is not weaker than armor-piercing bullets. Be careful, these guys' data models are equipped with the fighting skills of those fighting masters. There's even a simple artificial intelligence chip installed inside that can handle all kinds of attacks. Gwen, who was quickly dodging the spider robot's pursuit, didn't forget to speak up. "It's okay." Hod seemed to be able to see all the scenes around him, and he dodged all the attacks of the spider legs easily. He even calmly grabbed one of the spider legs and broke it with his elbow. There was no panic in his every move, and his behavior was even a little elegant. Gwen turned her head to avoid one of the spider legs, and her brain was buzzing when she saw this scene out of the corner of her eye. Who on earth is this guy? At this time, he can actually use meticulous fighting skills to fight back. Only someone like Tony Stark can compare to such an outstanding person. She couldn't help but sigh in a low voice, this technique is really too strong. Although it seems to be just a simple dodge, every step and movement has the shadow of different fighting. Wing Chun, Babo, Bagua, Muay Thai, boxing, judo, joint skills, etc. And each one must be the most advanced to be integrated and used. Bang! Hod used a Baji collapse to blast the nearest spider robot away. Don't these spider robots have any other tricks? He moved his wrist, and there was a little more impatience in his eyes. If he didn't want to see the performance of these spider robots, he would have dealt with them all. After all, in terms of fighting, if he said he was second, no one would dare to say second. There are probably few people in this world who can fight better than him. Buzz buzz buzz. At this moment, the spider robot in front of him exploded directly. The silver machine quickly reorganized in the air and turned into nearly 100 mechanical spiders. Although they were smaller in size, their number was like a tide rushing towards them. They split up. Gwen warned loudly, and was about to deal with the spider robots in front of her. But she suddenly found that these spider robots turned around and rushed towards Horde. Her expression became extremely ugly. Although the defense of this rhinoceros beetle was very strong, it was no match for so many spider robots. What's more, in this situation, no matter how powerful the fighting skills were, it would be useless. It seems that this old guy Jin Bing is a bit tired of playing. Hod looked at this scene and couldn't help but complain in his heart. He put his hand on the belt and pulled it to the right. Cast off armor explosion. A sound effect sounded. The heavy armor on his body exploded. The shattered fragments flew towards the mechanical spiders like dense raindrops. Hod pulled the rhinoceros beetle horn on his belt again. Time up sound effect. The next second, the spider robot that was lifted up in the air slowed down its descent speed instantly. Even the air around it almost froze. Not far away, Gwen, who was supporting them from the air, was also doing the same thing. The grass leaves in the wind were also swaying at full speed. As this time acceleration, Hodder looked around as if everything was still, with a hint of enlightenment in his eyes. It was as if time had been slowed down. No, to be precise, my speed has increased. The reason they can't see it is because I am moving at a super speed that human eyes cannot recognize. After thinking about all this, his pupils shrank rapidly. It seems that we should solve these troubles around first. Hod twisted his body and walked slowly among the spiders. Whenever he passed a mechanical spider, he would quickly tap it. At this time, the fragments that exploded also flew around at an almost stagnant speed. Time up ends. The next second, boom, all the robots explode. Gwen, who is in the air, has a drastic change of expression. What's going on? Why did everything explode all of a sudden? I didn't even blink, and that red afterimage, and inside the factory. Why did it suddenly explode? Is this the speed that this mecha can reach? King Bing's eyes widened, and even his breathing became rapid. This was the only thought left in his mind. But how could he not know about the person who possessed such technology? Could it be that it was really Tony Stark, but this guy changed into a battle suit? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.